Chapter 1085. Haha, Elder Yu, don't be impatient. When I Ching stepped forward, took out a top-grade crystal, and stuffed it into his hand. Elder Yu's expression softened slightly, and he accepted it without batting an eyelid. His gaze swept across the rest of the people. Seeing this, they heaved a sigh of relief. It turned out that he was deliberately making things difficult for them to gain benefits. Everyone smiled and gave out valuable items. Only then did Elder Yu show a hint of joy and relax. Let's go up. What surprised everyone, including Elder Yu, was that he did not ask for any benefits from Su Yu, as if he did not exist. However, even though it was strange, they did not want to complicate matters at such a critical juncture. They stepped onto the transportation portal with Su Yu. After putting in the crystal, as the transportation portal slowly turned, they breathed a sigh of relief. Swoosh, with a creaking sound, they were successfully transported out. However, they could sense that something was wrong. No, it's too far away from my prefecture. It would take at least an hour to be transported. How could it be? Everyone, be careful. This is short-distance transportation. It's not a divine-level transportation portal. In the transportation hall, Elder Yu's lips curled into a cruel smile. From an inconspicuous corner of the portal, he took out a hidden treasure. This treasure was a simple transportation portal with a concealing effect. They all thought that they were stepping onto a divine-level transportation portal. Little did they know that they were stepping onto this temporary, simple transportation portal. Naturally, the place they were transported to was not the prefecture they wanted to go to. Everyone panicked and quickly looked around. In the end, they saw a scene that made their hair stand on end. They had not been transported to any part of Jojo. They had all been transported into a dark secret chamber. In the secret chamber, corpses lay all over the ground. All of them had their hearts dug out and their souls missing. The stench of blood filled the air, accompanied by a strong rancid odor, was extremely uncomfortable. Haha, so many more. I Ching, you're very thoughtful. From a dark corner, a hoarse but not unpleasant voice came. With light footsteps, a demonic woman with white hair, purple lips, and red eyes walked out. Her face was beautiful, but her entire body exuded an evil aura. Seeing this person, everyone's heart sank. The glittering jewel mortal fairy. They had never seen the real person, but they had seen the portrait that had been transmitted to the world. The person in the secret chamber was the glittering jewel mortal fairy herself. When I Ching, you betrayed us. It was unknown whether it was anger or fear that caused the cold old woman to tremble. With his back facing them, when I Ching knelt respectfully in front of the glittering jewel mortal fairy. Without even turning his head, he said indifferently, "To be able to replenish my master's flesh and blood and become a part of her, how glorious is that? Have you been lying to us all this time? Even the story of your father's death is fake?" When I Ching stood up and turned around to look at them with pity. Of course it's true. However, after I received my father's message, I felt that we should rely on Master. Going against him will not end well. So, I wanted to take advantage of the situation and help Master. I wanted to quietly find the experts in the city to help Master recover his vitality. In order to make you believe me, I have to do everything in detail. Of course, I have to be realistic. Hearing this, everyone's limbs turned cold. This was a trap that had been set up perfectly. Who would care about the whereabouts of the experts that had been teleported out of the Central Plains? Even if someone found out that they were missing, it would not have happened on the territory of the Central Plains. You heartless beast, I will fight you to the death. The cold old woman's murderous aura flashed, and she stabbed Wen I Ching with her crutch. However, in the next moment, her body suddenly burst like a balloon and turned into minced meat. Standing in the same place, the glittering jewel mortal fairy held a beating heart in her hand, and with a bloody smile, she ate it. This scene made everyone's scalp go numb, and they shuddered. They even lost the courage to resist, waiting to be slaughtered one by one. The glittering jewel mortal fairy enjoyed it very much, and praised, "Well done, continue to lure the experts in the city. When I recover my vitality, helping you to become a mortal fairy will be a piece of cake." When I Ching was excited, but he glanced at Su Yu behind him, and was slightly surprised. "Master, don't you intend to enjoy this person?" Is there anyone behind you?" The glittering jewel mortal fairy glanced around, but there was no one. Wen Yiqing clicked his tongue, looked back at Su Yu, who was right in front of him, and then looked at the glittering jewel mortal fairy, with an inexplicable expression. The glittering jewel mortal fairy's eyes narrowed slightly. "You can see, but I can't. Who are you?" Wen Yiqing reacted and asked Su Yu. But the other party just stood in front of him with his hands behind his back, motionless. Feeling that something was wrong, Wen Yiqing yelled and rushed over, piercing through Su Yu's body. Su Yu's flesh and blood collapsed and flowed all over him. Wen Yiqing was even more confused. Did he see a ghost? "Master, Wen Yiqing could not understand the scene in front of him. The glittering jewel mortal fairy closed her eyes, and when she opened them again, a ray of light penetrated Wen Yiqing. Wen Yiqing suddenly became alert, and there was a ripple in his eyes, as if something had been resolved. His corpse is gone. Wen Yiqing was shocked to find that Su Yu's corpse on the ground had disappeared into thin air, and even the blood on his body had disappeared. "You have met an illusionary expert," the glittering jewel mortal fairy said indifferently. The glittering jewel mortal fairy said indifferently, "What I resolved for you just now was an illusion. I'm afraid this person has already seen through your trap." Wen Yiqing was shocked. "What? Illusion? What I saw today was an illusion all along." He suddenly recalled that Senior Yu, who was guarding the formation, had completely ignored Su Yu's existence. At first, he thought that Senior Yu looked down on his low cultivation and did not take him seriously, not even bothering to ask for benefits from him. Now that he thought about it, Senior Yu was not under the illusion, so he did not see Su Yu at all. He and the other All Creation's old monsters were confused by the illusion, thinking that Su Yu was beside them. In fact, Su Yu's real body had already retreated when they were under the illusion. From beginning to end, they had not noticed it at all. "Then where is he now?" Wen Yiqing asked in surprise. The glittering jewel mortal fairy said indifferently, "Now, the plan should be about to succeed, and we should use the divine level transportation portal to leave." "What? Wouldn't that be self-defeating, exposing the existence of Master and attracting the strong men of Jojo?" Wen Yiqing's face turned pale. However, the glittering jewel mortal fairy said casually, "I have recovered 30% of my primordial qi. If it isn't two mortal fairies working together, I can replenish my primordial qi." Upon hearing that, Wen Yiqing heaved a sigh of relief. "There is one more person here, and I'm afraid he has also escaped." The glittering jewel mortal fairy pointed indifferently at an unattractive woman. "This body has long been dead, and it has been possessed. I think it will soon succeed in using the divine level transportation portal." Wen Yiqing broke out in a cold sweat and knelt on the ground. "Master, please punish me. I am incompetent to have let two people escape. Your cultivation is too low, it's not your fault." "Well, do you know the identity of these two people?" The glittering jewel mortal fairy asked with a frown. Since the appearance of the divine power, she had been cautious. She had moved into the secret chamber and completely sealed her breath. Now that two suspicious people had appeared, she could not help but ask about them, feeling uneasy. "I'm not sure about this woman, but I know that young man. Speaking of which, you should know him too. I wanted to bring him back to surprise you." The glittering jewel mortal fairy was surprised. "Oh, who is it?" "Su Yu." "What? It's him." In an instant, the glittering jewel mortal fairy's white hair fluttered in the wind, and her terrifying aura rippled wildly. Her demonic face was full of malevolence and murderous energy. She looked like a ferocious ghost. Chapter 1086. Outside the teleportation hall, in a restaurant, a handsome young man, as radiant as the bright moon, sat leaning against the railing, a confident look on his face. Presumably, Wen Yiqing must have revealed his true colors and had a dispute with them after falling into the trap. Su Yu had been watching coldly from the sidelines. He did not doubt Wen Yiqing's identity as the son of the great Deputy Region Master of the Heavenly Knife region, nor did he doubt what had happened to the great Deputy Region Master. What he suspected was Wen Yiqing's motives. It sounded very reasonable, but after careful consideration, one could see that it was far-fetched. First, it was too much of a coincidence. They just happened to need to use the divine transportation portal, and they ran into Wen Yiqing, a victim of the glittering jewel demon god. Su Yu believed in coincidences, but years of experience told Su Yu that such coincidences must be abnormal. Secondly, Su Yu had a fundamental suspicion. He had personally fought with the glittering jewel demonic god, and only then did he realize how terrifying it was. The great deputy region master was eaten, but he was still able to send a soul message back before he died. This could fool others, but not Su Yu. Therefore, on that day, Su Yu felt that there was more to Wen Yiqing's words. After thinking about it for a night, he decisively gave up this opportunity. Sure enough, Elder Yu took out a hidden, simple transportation portal from the formation, confirming Su Yu's suspicions. Su Yu had his own reasons for not informing those people in time. This matter was all based on speculation, without the slightest evidence. If he told them it was a trap, would they believe him? If he alerted them and Wen Yiqing secretly targeted Su Yu, his identity would be exposed, and he would be in extreme danger. In the end, Su Yu chose to use illusions to find out. I hope they can get out of this. It's time for me to take action. Su Yu beat them at their own game. Since Wen Yiqing wanted to frame them, he might as well use Wen Yiqing to use the divine transportation portal to leave. With a flash of his eyes, Su Yu activated the illusions of the illusionary soul realm. Anyone who met his eyes would naturally recognize Su Yu as Wen Yiqing. Outside the hall, Su Yu walked forward with a smile. Elder Yu. Elder Yu looked up and was not surprised to see Wen Yiqing. His eyes brightened slightly. Oh, it's you, my dear nephew. How did it go? Su Yu replied smoothly, this time, it's all thanks to Elder Yu that they were fooled. My lord is very happy. If I can make that sir happy, what do I do? As long as sir doesn't forget about me, it's fine. Haha, don't worry, my lord. Master's vitality has recovered a lot. He will be able to return to his peak state after attracting some people. At that time, he will give you some pointers on your cultivation. I think it won't be a problem for you to break through to the mortal fairy level. I really envy you. Old man Yu was in high spirits, and his face was flushed with excitement. Ha ha ha, what senior? Didn't I tell you to call me old man Yu? Nephew, I hope you can put in a few good words for me in front of the master. As he spoke, Elder Yu took out some crystals and stuffed them into Su Yu's palm with a smile. Su Yu accepted it with a smile, revealing a tacit understanding. By the way, Elder Yu, I'm here because my lord has instructed me to make a trip to the eastern continent at the last minute to take care of an errand, Su Yu said solemnly. Elder Yu was surprised. The eastern continent. However, Elder Yu did not suspect anything. He hurriedly said, my lord's business cannot be delayed. I won't keep you to catch up. Hurry up and use the transportation portal. As he spoke, Elder Yu took the initiative to help Su Yu activate the transportation portal. Thank you for your trouble, Elder Yu. Su Yu cupped his fists and leaped onto the transportation portal. As the portal was activated, waves of space energy slowly enveloped Su Yu, sending him into the transportation portal. Su Yu secretly broke out in a cold sweat. Fortunately, he had managed to fool the old man. According to common sense, Su Yu's illusory technique could not forcibly confuse a stage 5 all creations old monster. At most, it could only confuse a stage 3 all creations old monster. However, Elder Yu was deep in the central prefecture and had let his guard down, so he was not on guard. Secondly, he had the intention of pleasing Wen Yiqing, so he had a huge subconscious flaw. Moreover, Su Yu had answered fluently without any obvious flaws, which had caused a stage 5 all creations old monster to fall into the illusory technique. Just as the transportation portal was about to be activated, a person entered the hall. He was slightly plump, and his eyes were long and narrow. He looked exceptionally fierce. It was the former Heavenly Knife Region Master. As his figure floated down, he shouted, Have you found Su Yu? Elder Yu looked back and said solemnly, Your humble servant pays his respects to the Region Master. The corners of his mouth secretly curled into a contemptuous smile. A Region Master who was like a drowning dog could only be arrogant in front of him. In front of the other region masters of the central prefecture, he could not even raise his head. However, this was a serious matter, and he did not dare to disobey. He said seriously, "I was ordered by my king to guard the transportation portal and prevent Suyu from using it to escape." The central prefecture's king was not unprepared to hunt Suyu down. In order to prevent Suyu from using the divine transportation portal in the central prefecture imperial city, he had specially instructed the guards of the transportation portal not to let Suyu enter the portal. They had all seen Suyu's portrait, so they could recognize him even if he had turned to ashes. If Suyu showed himself, he would be captured on the spot. "Well, that's good. I heard a message from the North City that a youth suspected to be Suyu had come to the central prefecture imperial city, so I came to patrol," the Heavenly Knife Region Master said. Elder Yu shook his head. He did not appear, and the transportation portal was never activated. The Heavenly Knife Region Master heaved a sigh of relief, his eyes filled with deep coldness. Suyu had forced him, a dignified region master, to hide in the central prefecture imperial city like a stray dog. Such a great shame and humiliation would not be appeased if he did not crush Suyu's bones and scatter his ashes. As for the patrol, it was just a matter of official business. He did not believe that Suyu really had the courage to come to the dangerous central prefecture alone. After all, this was the lair of the central prefecture's king. The Heavenly Knife Region Master was not very disappointed after hearing Elder Yu's response. He just glanced at the operating portal casually and raised his eyebrows. "Who is using the transportation portal? Didn't you say it was closed?" "Haha, it's that lord's new right-hand man, nephew Wen Yiqing. He is now ordered to go to the eastern continent on official business." Knowing that it was Wen Yiqing, the Heavenly Knife Region Master did not dare to neglect him. He looked up and nodded with a faint smile to show his goodwill. However, when he raised his head, the Heavenly Knife Region Master stood rooted to the spot, as if he had been struck by lightning. The figure in the transportation portal had long silver hair, a slender figure, and a face as handsome as a fairy. Who else could it be but Suyu? He felt like he was in a dream, and he bit the tip of his tongue. When he took a closer look, his expression changed greatly. Suyu. Elder Yu, who was standing to the side, was shocked and hurriedly said, "Suyu? What did Master say? Where is he?" As he surveyed his surroundings with his old eyes, he couldn't find Suyu's shadow, which confused him. The Heavenly Knife Region Master stared blankly at old Manu, who seemed to be blind. He was shocked and angry, and he shouted, "Yushin, how dare you indulge a wanted criminal right under my nose?" Yushin was annoyed when he heard that. He thought to himself, "Is the Heavenly Knife Region Master stupid? You want to slander me without any proof?" Just as he was about to explode in anger, Yushin suddenly felt that something was amiss, and he looked at Suyu again. In the past, he had never doubted Suyu's identity, and he was completely unaware that he had fallen into an illusory technique. However, the Heavenly Knife Region Master's strange behavior made him suspicious. As a Stage 5 All Creations old monster, once he was suspicious, the illusory technique would lose its effect. When he looked at Suyu again, the person standing on the transportation portal was not Wen Yiqing, but a strange young man. The young man's appearance was the wanted criminal that the central prefecture's king had ordered to be captured and killed on the spot, Suyu. Chapter 1087. Suyu. Yushin was shocked. How could he not know that he had fallen into an illusion? He was shocked and angry. A criminal had almost escaped from under his nose. On second thought, he was pleasantly surprised again. Since the central prefecture's king ascended to the throne 100 years ago, he rarely cared about foreign affairs. However, a few years ago, he issued a warrant for Suyu's arrest and promised a handsome reward. If he killed Suyu, he would definitely be valued. Who knows, he might even be appointed as the domain lord of a domain. "Little thief, how dare you offend me? Today, you will not be able to leave this place alive," Yushin shouted as he teleported to the front of the formation. Then, he slapped the teleportation formation with both hands. Whether it was to fight for credit or to atone for his crime, it was necessary for him to be one step ahead of the Carnate Knife Region Master. The attack of a Stage 5 All Creations old monster was extremely powerful. However, with a mighty strike, the teleportation formation shook violently, as if it had been disturbed by an extremely strong external force. With just a shake, it stopped teleporting. Suyu sighed silently. He had to finish this quickly. Otherwise, if other strong men came, there would be endless troubles. With a sharp light flashing in his eyes, Suyu clapped his hands backhandedly. Then, the 3 silver swords behind him flew into the void and began to be arranged under Suyu's control. Be careful of that sword formation, the Heavenly Knife Region Master warned Yushin as he joined the siege from the other side. Humph! Yushin snorted coldly. He thought the Heavenly Knife Region Master was doing this on purpose to take credit for killing Suyu. He didn't believe this young man could be so powerful. Suyu was facing the siege of 2 people at the same time. He looked calm and didn't panic at all. Great Sun Punishment of Fairy. A pitch-black sun appeared in Suyu's left and right palms. It was somewhat similar to Han Fei's Heavenly Demon Black Sunday. However, its power was incomparable. As soon as it appeared, Yushin's face changed abruptly. The Heavenly Knife Region Master's face was also full of horror. They hurriedly retreated. What is this? The 2 of them looked terrified. The pitch-black sun gave them a sense of infinite danger. It seemed that it would disappear if they touched it. This thing was the thunder thread of the tribulation of Thunder Feather left in the Great Sun Punishment of Fairy picture. Yesterday, he had tried to cultivate it. Perhaps it was because the lightning strands he had stored were extremely powerful, but it was very easy for him to cultivate it. He immediately succeeded in cultivating the first level and was able to make use of the lightning strands within it. Not to mention the all creations, even the mortal fairies were afraid. Suyu had originally planned to use it as his trump card when his opponent was unprepared. However, the current situation was urgent, and he couldn't afford to engage in a prolonged battle with it. Of course it's to take your lives, Suyu shouted coldly. Now, he just wanted to kill the 2 of them quickly with the force of a thunderbolt, and then use the divine-level transportation portal to leave. Not good. Quick, go and ask Zhong Wushuang for help. Yushin's expression changed drastically, and he got ready to teleport away. That terrible black sun made Yushin feel extremely afraid. His intuition told him that it was extremely dangerous. Even a mortal fairy might not be able to resist it completely. Currently, the strongest person in the city was Zhong Wushuang, the peerless king who was born to be an emperor. The Heavenly Knife Region Master's eyelids twitched violently, and he cursed in his heart. I haven't seen him for a few days, and this lad has come up with such a dangerous thing again. After a moment of hesitation, the Heavenly Knife Region Master stepped back a little, and shouted in a low voice, "Inform the experts of the palace immediately, and I will stall this lad." He could see the danger of the black sun, but if he didn't get close to it, he might not be able to do anything to it. After all, Suyu's cultivation was not high enough. Otherwise, if Suyu had teleported to him, he wouldn't have had the chance to distance himself from him. Yushin didn't doubt Suyu, so he didn't dare to hesitate anymore. Immediately, he tore the void apart, and was about to leave the transportation Great Hall. He wanted to go back to the palace to ask for reinforcements to kill Suyu. "Do you think you can leave?" Suyu said calmly, and his left eye was filled with a deep purple light. "Time freeze." With a light shout, the purple light covered both of them at the same time. Their bodies were frozen at the same time. Except for their minds, their bodies were like puppets, and they lost their agility. However, compared to Yushin, the Heavenly Knife Region Master was able to get rid of the time freeze. His expression changed drastically, and he said, "Time magical power, you. Staring at Suyu's palms approaching him rapidly, the Heavenly Knife Region Master was so shocked that he didn't dare to stay any longer. Immediately, he tore the void apart, turned around, and disappeared into the void to escape. However, the time freeze was not completely useless, and his movements were much slower in Suyu's eyes. Humph! A cold snort came from behind, and Suyu hit the Heavenly Knife Region Master's back with a pitch-black blazing sun in his right hand. Instantly, the Heavenly Knife Region Master smelled the scent of death. However, because of this, his survival potential was also stimulated. With a loud roar, a sharp awl with amazing spiritual pressure suddenly appeared behind him, and blocked the black blazing sun in Suyu's palm. Apparently, it was a rare fairy artifact. The blazing sun bombarded the fairy artifact, and a loud sizzling sound was heard, as if it was rotting. Then, the fairy artifact was turned into ashes inch by the black blazing sun. However, the black blazing sun continued to weaken and shrink. When more than half of the fairy artifact was destroyed, the black blazing sun was completely obliterated. However, there was still a pitch-black blazing sun in Suyu's left palm. His right palm had been used up, and his left palm, which had been prepared for a long time, attacked. In an instant, the damaged fairy artifact was completely turned into ashes. However, the Heavenly Knife Region Master took this opportunity to escape into the void, and successfully escaped. Yu Xin, who witnessed this scene with his own eyes, was extremely shocked. What on earth was that thing that could destroy a fairy artifact? At this moment, a pair of cold eyes looked at him indifferently. I didn't want to kill anyone, and I didn't want to leave the central prefecture. However, you forced me to attack you, so don't blame me for this. Sizzle. With a dull sound, the remaining power of the thunderbolt in Suyu's left palm imprinted on Yu Xin's back. At this moment of life and death, Yu Xin's potential burst out. Like the Heavenly Knife Region Master, he forcibly broke away from the time constraint, and his body regained a bit of power to move. Then, he tried to enter the void in front of him. However, he was a bit late, and was imprinted on his back by Suyu. Puff. With a dull sound, the remaining thunderbolt didn't turn him into ashes, but directly penetrated his heart and destroyed his soul. Rolling his eyes, Yu Xin died on the spot. His body fell out of the void and landed in front of Suyu's feet. Suyu hurriedly took away his space ring, and jumped into the divine-level transportation portal without hesitation. Then, he activated it and escaped. Undoubtedly, the noise here had alarmed the strong people in the city, and a large number of strong people rushed to the transportation hall. When they came in, Suyu's figure, who was about to be transported by the transportation portal, was reflected in their eyes. Although not all of them could recognize Suyu's young face, it was enough for one person to recognize him. It's him. Suyu. The criminal wanted by our king. Regardless of whether you kill him or capture him alive, you can be summoned by our king personally and fulfill a wish. You can even become our king's disciple. Someone recognized Suyu and cried out in surprise. When he realized that he should enjoy this great opportunity alone, it was already too late. Chapter 1088. There was a moment of silence until a magical artifact bombarded the formation. In an instant, the operation of the formation was stopped again. Even if it was a divine-level transmission formation, it could not be disturbed by external forces. Suyu's heart sank when he failed to teleport again. What he had been most worried about had happened. He had used his trump card, but it still caused a commotion and attracted the strong men in the city. Suyu's eyes were full of killing intent. He did not want to use too many weapons, but things did not go as he wished. You are courting death. Looking at the person who was attacking him, Suyu shouted coldly. He weaved signs with both hands, and a 1,000-feet-long lake of rolling demonic energy appeared under his feet. Amidst the rolling demonic energy, a giant demonic dragon, which was 1,000 feet wide, appeared with a loud rumbling sound. The attacker was only a Stage 1 All Creations old monster. Caught off guard, he was crushed by the demonic dragon. He did not even have time to scream. This attack shocked most of the martial artists, but it could not scare away some famous All Creations old monsters. Humph! I will deal with you. A Stage 2 All Creations old monster snorted coldly. With a deep shout, 10 rays of light shot out from his index finger. Each ray was like a sword energy, and they pierced through the demonic dragon. The demonic dragon struggled but could not break free from the penetrating sword energy. With a roar, the demonic energy collapsed and formed an explosion, which smashed the entire transmission hall. However, Suyu was not afraid. He grabbed with his right hand, and a long silver sword energy condensed in his palm. He slashed through the air. The Stage 2 All Creations old monster had just destroyed the demonic dragon. Before he had time to feel proud, he suddenly felt a bright silver light pressing down on him. Get lost. The stage 2 all creations old monster did not know what to do. His index fingers crossed, and the 10 rays of light condensed into a fine net, trying to reflect the silver light. However, under the touch of the silver light, the 10 rays of light broke inch by inch like bubbles. His body was flashed by the silver light, and then his whole body was split into two from the middle. A dignified stage 2 all creations old monster was killed without knowing what had happened. Looking at the situation, even his soul was destroyed. Killing 2 people in a row shocked the first group of strong men who had arrived outside the hall. They finally remembered that the famous Su Yu was the powerful man who fought the glittering jewel mortal fairy and crushed the second starry sky genius, the demon-devouring emperor. How could his combat power be weak? For a time, the crowd went silent like cicadas in the winter, and no one dared to step forward. A bunch of cowards. Could it be that he alone can defeat all the experts of our central plains? Someone in the crowd instigated and shouted. Instantly, the pairs of frightened eyes once again flashed with greed. If they killed him, they would be able to ascend to the heavens in a single step. They would be summoned by the central prefecture's king and be able to fulfill any of their wishes. This was a heavenly opportunity that was one of a kind in this world. Although this child was dangerous, it was indeed impossible for him to fight against all the powerhouses present. Everyone, rush forward. We can't hold on for too long. Who would be able to kill him would depend on their luck. He delivered the final blow. Compared to the risks, the rewards were too great. Man disposes, God disposes. Today is the day to see if everyone will be successful in the future. Let's attack together. That sinister voice once again bewitched the crowd. The already restless Central Plains cultivators gritted their teeth and charged forward with bloodshot eyes. 1, 2, 3, finally, several hundred people charged over. There were divine masters among them, as well as tens of all creation experts. In their eyes, Su Yu was a great credit to them. Around the teleportation hall, there were still countless strong people rushing over from all directions like a tide. They surrounded the place so tightly that not even a drop of water could trickle through. Among them, there were many auras that even Su Yu was afraid of. Su Yu stood on the ruins of the teleportation hall and looked around at the countless central prefecture martial artists. Pairs of fanatical and greedy eyes pierced through Su Yu's body like sharp blades. Taking a deep breath, Su Yu was overflowing with coldness. There was no fear on his face. Instead of retreating, he advanced. Behind him, the demonic dragon soared, and in his right hand, the sword energy swept through the air. The attacking central prefecture martial artists were like moths flying into a flame, dying one after another. However, in contrast to the rapidly diminishing lives, the fervor in their eyes did not diminish. Instead, it increased. This thief killed our central prefecture martial artists. He is extremely vicious and unforgivable. Everyone has the right to kill him. What are the people of the central prefecture waiting for? Kill. Our king is an exceptional king. Those who are wanted by him are definitely villains. We, the righteous people, will kill them. This is in accordance with the heavens and the people of Jojo. Su Yu's massacre did not make them timid. Instead, it aroused their murderous intent. They were shouting unreasonable arguments. They were a group of people who abandoned righteousness for the sake of profit, but they still considered themselves righteous people. Su Yu's eyes were full of coldness. He was not moved by their emotions. He just kept on killing. The almighty strong men were annihilated. One after another, all creation's old men were killed by the sword energy. Some of their souls did not even have time to escape. In less than half a cup of tea's time, blood was flowing everywhere near the teleportation portal. More than 100 corpses were lying on the ground. It was a ghastly sight. The residents of the central prefecture had not seen such a huge massacre in the central prefecture city for a long time. It had caused rivers of blood to flow. However, more and more enemies were killed. More and more people could not resist the temptation and joined the tide of killing. Su Yu was like a small boat in a stormy sea. He was constantly being swallowed by the tide and was about to be destroyed. Creak. Above the crowd, a loud noise was heard. The void was split open, and several extremely powerful auras appeared from it, One of them was the Heavenly Knife Region Master, who had returned. Standing beside him were 3 old men with white hair and beards. They looked extremely old. The astonishing thing was that they actually had peak-level cultivation that was equivalent to that of an area ruler. They were peak Wanxiang experts. Seeing Su Yu's situation, the Heavenly Knife Region Master was pleasantly surprised. The black blazing sun that Su Yu had just used was too frightening, and it left a lingering fear in his heart. Even now, he still felt his skin crawl and his scalp go numb. Seeing Su Yu was surrounded and gradually losing strength, he could not help but laugh hideously. Su Yu, you really did not want to die. You really broke into the Central Prefecture city as the Central Prefecture's king expected. This time, you will die without a burial place. Old region masters, don't be impatient. Let's wait and see. When he is almost exhausted, we will attack him. The Heavenly Knife Region Master cupped his fists at them. The 3 white-haired old men were the former region masters of the Central Prefecture. After they retired, some of them chose to leave the Central Prefecture to find an opportunity to break through to the mortal fairy level. Some of them stayed and became the guards of the Central Prefecture city. In terms of real strength, the Heavenly Knife Region Master was far inferior to these old region masters. Is he really as powerful as you said? The old region master on the far left squinted his eyes, which were as small as mung beans. He carefully looked at Su Yu, who was fighting tens of thousands of martial artists alone. When his eyes swept over Yu Xin's body lying on the ground, he suddenly fell silent. They had sharp eyes. The breath of the feather of thunder left on Yu Xin's body shocked them a little. The 3 of them looked solemn as they silently watched the movement below. It was safest to wait for these fearless martial artists to wear Su Yu down. When he was exhausted, they would attack him. Hold on, he can't hold on much longer. The instigator in the crowd let out another ear-piercing cry. At this moment, Su Yu's face was pale. He had killed more than 300 people. However, killing them consumed a lot of his strength. His face showed signs of exhaustion. Die, you traitor. An ugly stage 3 all creations middle-aged woman's eyes flashed coldly. She took the opportunity when Su Yu was killing a stage 2 all creations old monster to attack. She pulled out the hairpin on the back of her head with one hand and rubbed it in her hand. Then, a powerful sword feather appeared from the hairpin. Each sword feather contained the amazing power of stage 4 all creations. When hundreds of sword feather attacked, Su Yu could not avoid it. Chapter 1089. Return of 10,000 Sword. Su Yu took a deep breath, and a muffled sound came from his dantian. The endless silver sword energy was like rays of light, covering all directions. The attacking sword feathers collided with the sword feathers and destroyed them. The remaining silver sword energy swept towards the ugly middle-aged woman. She gritted her teeth and painfully took out a gourd. Once it was opened, a ghastly sound came from inside. Numerous skeletons emitting ghostly auras flew out while shrieking crazily. They formed a layer of bloody clouds in front of them, devouring the boundless silver sword chi that was attacking them. The remaining blood clouds rushed forward, and the bloodthirsty skeletons bared their fangs and brandished their claws, extremely ferocious. Su Yu was not afraid. With a cold face, he raised his right hand, and the sword energy in his palm condensed into a long silver sword. He slashed it fiercely, splitting the remnant cloud into 2. The sword energy that could cut through anything completely annihilated the blood cloud. However, behind the blood cloud, a palm wearing a black glove stretched out and took the opportunity to slap the long silver sword. Kai, the palm dissipated, but the black light on the glove stained the long silver sword and continued to extend down along the sword, trying to spread to Su Yu's arm. Looking at the sword again, this object condensed by the sword energy was being corroded continuously. What a strong poison! Su Yu made a prompt decision, abandoned the sword and retreated. Now, the owner of the black palm, the ugly middle-aged woman, shouted coldly and teleported to a foot in front of Su Yu. The black palm pressed towards Su Yu's chest extremely quickly and violently. At such a close distance, Su Yu did not even have the strength to defend himself. Moreover, he had lost his weapon and could not block it. Madman, kneel down and accept your death. The ugly woman shouted and pressed her palm on Su Yu's chest fiercely. However, at the critical moment, a wine-red light flashed in front of Su Yu, and a space vortex appeared. The ugly woman's palm was aimed at Su Yu's chest, but unexpectedly, it hit into the vortex. A huge suction force sucked her whole body into it. She was shocked, and with a scream, she struggled to escape, resisting the suction force of the vortex. For a moment, her body was in a deadlock in front of the vortex. However, this deadlock was enough. With a wave of his hand, Su Yu gathered a wisp of silver sword energy at his fingertips and swept it across the ugly woman's neck. Immediately, a large head flew into the sky, accompanied by a shower of blood. At the same time, a transparent soul escaped from the headless body with a venomous look on its face. However, just as Su Yu finished off the ugly woman with his sword, an extremely cold aura suddenly came from behind him. Su Yu's heart skipped a beat, and he moved away without thinking. A cold stab of pain suddenly came from his waist. Turning his head, he saw a short martial artist with a dark complexion and a sinister smile on his face. He grinned as he played with a dark dagger in his hand. "Hihi, your reaction is quite fast." Hearing the voice, Su Yu's gaze turned cold. It was you who incited the crowd. The voice belonged to the person who had been inciting the crowd. Who would have thought that not only would they join hands to kill Su Yu, but there would also be someone who would launch a sneak attack? No, you are full of evil, and everyone has the right to kill you. A villain like you can be killed by anyone. Why do you need me to incite you? The short martial artist sneered disapprovingly. Su Yu wiped the dark blood from the corner of his mouth. That sword was obviously dipped in poison. He stared at him coldly, and also at the people around him. Villain? I, Su Yu, am not a kind person, but when have I killed anyone indiscriminately? Have I ever harmed Jojo? Su Yu asked coldly. His voice was not loud, but it rang in everyone's ears. He had never killed indiscriminately, nor had he harmed Jojo. He had even prevented the glittering jewel mortal fairy from regaining her demonic body, delayed the destruction of Jojo, and publicized the evidence of the Heavenly Knife region colluding with the ghost race. Looking at his life, he had nothing to do with the word villain. The crowd fell silent for a moment. The short, dark-faced martial artist sneered immediately and said sarcastically, "What a joke. Without you, Jojo would not be saved. With the arrival of the glittering jewel demonic god, even without you, there would be experts to support it. As for the villain, Humph, your origin is unknown. It is said that you are not a citizen of Jojo at all. Those who are not of our race must have a different heart. What else do you have to say?" Honestly speaking, without Su Yu's help, Jojo would not be saved if the glittering jewel demonic god were to appear. A mere glittering jewel mortal fairy had defeated the Prefecture King Alliance. If the glittering jewel mortal fairy seized her demonic body on the spot and descended with the body of a demonic god, those who are not of our race must have a different heart? Su Yu felt a chill in his heart. He looked around at all the people present. Looking at the pairs of eyes that were about to devour him, he felt an indescribable coldness. Ha ha! Su Yu looked up at the sky and laughed. His laughter was deep and cold, and his eyes were full of deep disappointment. I, Su Yu, am only a member of your race. He could not help but think of the glittering jewel mortal fairy and Bai Lingtian. They had invited Su Yu to join them, but Su Yu had rejected them because he was a human. Humph, what are you laughing at? Those who are not of Jojo are all members of the alien race. Our king must have ordered you to be arrested for the same reason. Kill you, and the whole world will follow you. The short, dark-faced martial artist interrupted him coldly. Right. I heard that he came from a foreign continent, so I suspected that he was a member of the alien race. Stirring up trouble in Jojo, he must be up to something. The fierce battle with the glittering jewel mortal fairy and the exposure of the collusion of the ghost race are all lies and tricks to deceive the world. Everyone was agitated and indignant. It was as if they had regarded Su Yu, a member of their race of unknown origin, as an irreconcilable enemy. Most of them were looking for excuses for themselves, but there were also many people who were jealous of this legendary genius who had suddenly sprung up like a shooting star. If he was a member of the alien race, Then they could kill him with a clear conscience, and they could face Su Yu's excellence with a clear conscience. The mentality of self-deception led them into a morbid state of stubbornness. Su Yu had never expected that the exposure of his origin would attract such a group of people. Looking at the crowd, Su Yu closed his eyes slightly, and his expression gradually calmed down. When he opened his eyes again, they were full of indifference. Yes, I am a member of the alien race, so I will also do something that only the alien race would do. Su Yu's body shook, and a stream of black blood mixed with highly toxic poison spurted out from his pores, soaking his white robe. A pair of starry eyes turned indescribably solemn. Those who want to take my head must come within 10,000 feet. Otherwise, stand 10,000 feet away. The sudden words made the wave-like crowd burst into laughter. Could it be that he has been scared out of his wits? He is already a drowning dog, and yet he is still so deranged. His voice was interrupted before he finished speaking. After 3 breaths, within 10,000 feet, all will die, and not a single chicken or dog will be left alive. Those who are 10,000 feet away will live. After he finished speaking, Su Yu slowly closed his eyes and started counting silently. All of a sudden, the whole place was silent. Staring at Su Yu, who was heavily surrounded and in a deadly situation, a trace of uneasiness flashed through the hearts of many people. After all, he was a strong martial artist who had fought with the glittering jewel mortal fairy. After 1 breath, no one was shaken. After 2 breaths, still no one was shaken. After 3 breaths, there were finally 2 or 3 cautious people who quietly retreated 10,000 feet away. Yes, they just happened to stand at the edge of 10,000 feet away. Coincidentally, at that moment, Su Yu slowly opened his eyes, and looked around at the tens of thousands of martial artists who were slowly closing in on him. He sighed silently in his heart, and calmed down silently. I have cultivated this move for a long time, but I am still unwilling to use it. Even if I die, I am unwilling to implicate the innocent. Su Yu sighed faintly. But, this is your own choice. After that, he raised his head and looked at the sky. A vast and mighty charm, like a picture scroll, spread out, covering 10,000 feet of the world. Chapter 1090. The Heavenly Knife Region Master felt a sense of familiarity. He couldn't help but look up at the sky. A gigantic eye spanned 100,000 miles across the sky. Standing under the giant eye, one couldn't see the end of it. It was endless. Is this his divine decree? When Su Yu was chased by the Heavenly Knife Region, he was forced to release a strange profound intent. That day, when he was in the city, he sensed the existence of the giant eye from a great distance. Later, he was surprised to hear the description from the deputy region masters who had escaped. Now that he saw it with his own eyes, he was still shocked by the strange sound. This is the peak of the pure divine decree, but it seems to be mixed with other things. Have you seen it before? The 3 old region masters were shocked. It was the divine path, and it had been cultivated to the peak of the pure divine decree. Among the younger generation of this era, Su Yu was the only one who had achieved this, except for Jiyu Taishu. Yes, it is the peak of the pure divine decree, and it has been mixed with other paths. It has become strange and unpredictable. I'm afraid even Jiyu Taishu is not as good as it. I have seen it with my own eyes. It has an extremely strong space-devouring power, which can transport people to a very far place. It doesn't cause much harm, and its effect on us is close to 0. The Heavenly Knife Region Master hid his hands in his sleeves and smiled. He had even used the pure divine decree. It seemed he was exhausted and had used up all his trump cards. He is a rare divine path genius. Unfortunately, he is an alien. Well, his death is not to be regretted, the 3 old region masters said indifferently. Out of fear of Su Yu, they didn't attack him immediately. They planned to wait until Su Yu was exhausted and had no strength to fight back. Then, they would kill him with a swift blow. The giant eye in the sky gradually formed, which shocked everyone in the central prefecture city. They all looked up at the sky. The martial artists who were within 100,000 feet of the eye were no longer relaxed, and the excitement in their eyes was mostly extinguished by the strange vision. The Heavenly Knife Region Master, who was leisurely waiting for the final blow, suddenly frowned. This eye seemed to have something to do with what he had seen that day, as well as the description of the people who had escaped. The thing that had created the terrifying spatial vortex was a huge wine-red eye, and the thing in front of him was a pale eye that was filled with the ripples of reincarnation. 3 old region masters, something doesn't seem right. The heavenly knife region master took out his hands from his sleeves, his face grave. While he was hesitating whether he should warn the central prefecture people below to escape, the giant eye in the sky had already been activated. An eye full of ripples, shaped like an eye of reincarnation, emitted an aura that made one's soul palpitate. Suddenly, the ripples in his eyes rotated and shrank, like an abyss that kept sinking. Putong, an old man, who was merely a level 9 fairy, suddenly fell to the ground without any warning. His expression was calm and there was nothing unusual about it. Then, one after another, all of the experts, including the level 9 fairies, fell to the ground. Then it was the 1st grade Almighty, followed by the 2nd grade Almighty, the 3rd grade Almighty, the 4th grade. Like an invisible plague, the people within 30,000 meters fell to the ground one after another according to their ranks. From the point of view of the 4 all creation's old monsters, the densely packed central prefecture's citizens were like a wheat field that had been crushed, and they were falling one after another. Their souls, which were invisible to the naked eye, were struggling and screaming as they were forcibly dragged from their bodies and sucked into the giant reincarnation eye in the sky. The 4 old men's expressions changed dramatically. Their souls had been forcibly swallowed by the giant eye. In the current world, there was no magical power that could forcibly separate a person's soul from his body, unless the person himself took the initiative. However, the reincarnation eye above their heads was extremely domineering. It actually, directly sucked away their souls, leaving behind a pile of corpses. Everyone, retreat to 100,000 meters away, no, 300,000 meters away, the old region master shouted loudly. His loud voice awakened the bewildered central prefecture people. The 3 old region masters were so angry that their eyes almost popped out of their sockets. Indeed, as this alien had said, no one was spared within 30,000 meters. Seeing the people around them fall to the ground one after another, and seeing their transparent souls struggling to be sucked into the giant eye in the sky, the 3 old region masters finally suppressed their greed. As if they were shrouded by a huge shadow, their bodies stiffened and they kept retreating to a distance of 30,000 meters away. However, it was too late for them to retreat now. The swallowing power of the giant eye in the sky slowly accumulated to the extreme, and suddenly exploded. In an instant, not only the divine masters, but also the all creation's souls were being swallowed crazily. Ah, no. A stage 1 all creation's old monster hesitated for a moment, and then he was shocked to find that even though he was an all creation's old monster, his soul was also being swallowed by an invisible force and was frantically leaving his body. Although he was howling in pain, it was of no use. With a swoosh, a lifelike soul that was almost materialized was roaring in horror and struggling to be sucked into the giant eye. Then, it was the all creation stage 2. Then, it was the all creation stage 3. The short black-faced man's expression changed dramatically. At this moment, he was on the edge of the giant eye and was about to escape. However, his soul was shackled by the swallowing power from the sky, and it seemed to be separated from his body. It was all thanks to his strong will that he was barely attached to his body. Otherwise, he would have been swallowed by the horrible giant eye like the rest of the people. At this moment, there was no longer any semblance of a righteous man on his face. His face was filled with horror, and he stammered, Let go, are you going to make more mistakes? Suyu did not speak. He went straight to the center of the ruins, swept away the ruins with 1 foot, and revealed the transmission portal. As expected of a divine-level transmission portal, it was not damaged in the slightest after the battle just now. Suyu squatted down, put down the crystal stone, and reactivated it. Then, he said indifferently, Isn't this the result you want? You think that I am a member of the foreign race, and as a member of the foreign race, isn't it perfectly justified for me to slaughter the human race? I don't care about saving you, but don't hurt me when I kill you. Ah, stop it, or the people of the central prefecture will not let you go. The short martial artist roared fiercely. His face was no longer cunning, and it was replaced by panic and anxiety because his soul was about to collapse. Suyu slowly closed his eyes and said with a blank expression, "Stop it, and you will not let me go." Swoosh! With a scream, the soul of the short martial artist was suddenly stripped from his body, and in the midst of his horrified roar, he was sucked into the void. As far as the eye could see, within 10,000 feet, there was really no one left alive, and no one escape. Even the famous fierce man, Black Seven Knives, was not spared. Black Seven Knives was a fierce man comparable to Xue Di in the past, and their strength was very similar. Unexpectedly, today, he was easily slaughtered like a piece of grass. The people of the central prefecture, who stood 10,000 feet away, gasped in the cold air, especially the 3 people who had cautiously left the area. Their backs were cold, and they were covered in cold sweat. Their legs could not help but tremble. Within 10,000 feet, they died. Outside 10,000 feet, they lived. The people of the central prefecture, who stood 10,000 feet away, at this moment, their teeth were chattering, and the soles of their feet were cold. How could they dare to step within 10,000 feet? Even the few old monsters with the cultivation of stage 4 all creations hid in the crowd and did not dare to step forward. Therefore, under the gaze of 100,000 people, Suyu stood in the dead silent area and opened the transmission portal as if there was no one else around. The space vibrated again, and it would only take 5 breaths to transport him far away from Jojo. At this moment, everyone was silent, and no one dared to stop him. They did not dare, but someone else did. You killed the people of the central prefecture, and you want to leave just like that? The 3 old region masters' faces were as cold as water, and they descended. The eye of reincarnation above their heads could do nothing to them. Slowly, Suyu glanced at the Heavenly Knife Region Master, who was hidden in the depths of the clouds and could not appear in public. He said indifferently, "You can try to stop me, if you are not afraid of death." The combination of the time freeze and the Great Sun Punishment fairy picture could kill an all-creations strong man at the peak. If the combination was good and the timing was right, it might succeed. If the 3 old region masters had the guts to attack, they would have done it a long time ago. Why would they wait until now to threaten him? They were also in a difficult position, but if they did not show up, they were afraid that the central prefecture's king would blame them. "Evil creature, why don't you surrender?" As expected, they only shouted, but did not dare to get too close. The Heavenly Knife Region Master's narrow escape, and Yushin's dead body lying on the ground, all frightened them. They did not want to fight with Suyu, but they had to pretend. In fact, they were the ones who wanted Suyu to leave immediately. There were 4 breaths left. Suyu was counting in silence, and so were the 3 old region masters. The Heavenly Knife Region Master was stunned, and he could not help but curse in his heart, 3 cowardly old things. The old region masters, who had lived for more than 1,000 years, saw things more clearly than the Heavenly Knife Region Master. What was the most important thing in the world? Cultivation techniques, elixirs, opportunities? No, it was fate. Now they had reached the peak of all creations, and the central prefecture's king was just a mortal fairy. He could not give them a chance to become mortal fairies. So, why did they want to exchange their lives for the central prefecture's king's reward? Seeing this, the Heavenly Knife Region Master was very annoyed. If he had known this, he would not have told them the truth. Therefore, a very strange scene appeared. The 3 venerable old region masters of the central city stood in front of Suyu, their faces full of anger and threat. Suyu closed his eyes and did not say a word, as if he had closed half of the city gate. There were 3 breaths left. 2 breaths. The 3 old region masters were very nervous. They could not wait to help him and speed up the operation of the transportation portal. 1 breath. The 3 of them secretly let out a sigh of relief. They looked at each other and smiled tacitly. Finally, this tricky problem was thrown out. Whoever wanted to kill him could go ahead. Bang! A muffled sound could be heard. However, the transportation portal did not succeed, but it was destroyed suddenly. The 3 of them were stunned and stared at Suyu in disbelief. The one who destroyed the transportation portal was not someone else, but Suyu. He pointed his finger at the transportation portal in front of him, and a little bit of vital energy stopped the operation of the portal. Chapter 1091. Swoosh. All of a sudden, a white-haired demonic figure appeared in the deathly silent mountain of corpses. She was extremely beautiful, and her long robe was sticking to her alluring body, outlining the curves of her body. Her purple lips were full of devilish color, and her blood-red eyes were like two red gems, embellishing her eyes. The elegant beauty was indeed beautiful, but it was also exceptionally evil. Almost no one in the area knew this woman who had appeared out of nowhere. Only the 3 old region masters and the Heavenly Knife region master changed their expressions at the same time. Glittering jewel. Mortal fairy. Their throats were dry, and their eyes were wide open. They couldn't believe their eyes. Others might not know the appearance of the glittering jewel mortal fairy, but as peak all creations, they were the favorite targets of the glittering jewel mortal fairy. How could they not know? How could she appear here? Their bodies trembled violently, and their hearts were filled with fear. Hearing that the woman in front of them was the infamous bloodthirsty demonic god, the glittering jewel mortal fairy, they were terrified. Panic spread through the people's hearts like a plague, and the crowd that had gathered around them fled like a swarm of bees. Screams, and roars were all in a mess. The Heavenly Knife region master's expression changed abruptly, and he had no time to care about Suyu. He turned his eyes and fled quickly. He was running away, but the 3 old region masters were even faster. Their figures flashed, and they tore the void apart to escape. Only Suyu stood silently on the transportation portal, and he didn't make a move to escape. Ah! All of a sudden, a miserable scream spread through half of the central prefecture city. In the sky 100,000 miles away, a void crack appeared abruptly, and the shape of the crack changed violently, indicating that the space was extremely unstable. A large amount of blood, along with the torn clothes, spurted out from the crack. The clothes and the blood, which contained the powerful all creations power, belonged to one of the 3 old region masters. At the same time, not far away, several void cracks appeared in different directions, and a figure fell out from each of them. It was the Heavenly Knife region master and the other 2 old region masters. Their faces were gloomy, and their eyes were fixed on the figure of the white-haired demonic woman. Then, many void cracks appeared, and the all creations strong men fell out from them. The space within a radius of 100,000 miles has been locked, a stage 2 all creations old monster said in a trembling voice, his face pale. Anyone who tried to force their way through the locked space wall would end up like the old domain master. They would cause the space to be in disorder and be crushed into pieces in the space turbulence. When a divine master reached the edge of 100,000 miles, he discovered in horror that there was a formless barrier that isolated them within 100,000 miles. They were unable to leave. Looking at the motionless glittering jewel mortal fairy, everyone's hearts trembled. They were terrified and panic-stricken. Suyu fixed his gaze on the glittering jewel mortal fairy. He didn't expect to provoke this demonic god. If Suyu hadn't stopped the teleportation in time, he would have ended up like the old region master. He couldn't help but sigh. I didn't expect you had such a secret relationship with the central prefecture's king. How surprising. It was no wonder that Linlang had disappeared without a trace despite the joint efforts of the prefecture's kings. It turned out that he was hiding in the central prefecture under the protection of the central prefecture's king. I spared you last time. I didn't expect that we would meet again so soon. The glittering jewel mortal fairy appeared. Her expression was calm and composed, and she had a faint smile on her face. She had said last time that she would not spare him if they met again. You know what I want. Just give it to me, the glittering jewel mortal fairy said calmly. What she wanted was the demonic body. Suyu glanced at the central prefecture's people who were trapped in the 100,000 miles space. There were no less than 300,000 of them. They were all attracted by the noise in this place. They didn't expect to see the glittering jewel mortal fairy. Have you decided to kill all of them? Suyu sighed. The glittering jewel mortal fairy glanced at them with her blood-red eyes as if she was looking at ants. Then, she said calmly, they are to me like livestock to you humans. They are food. It is perfectly justified to eat them, she said sarcastically, you treat them as your own people. However, they all regard you as a member of a different race. Everyone has the right to kill you. What reason do you have to protect your own kind? The glittering jewel mortal fairy reached out her slender hand and said, You are the only human I don't want to kill. Give me the thing, and I will let you go. As for the lives of the others, why do you, an alien, worry about them? Su Yu glanced at the Central Prefecture's people who were trapped. After pondering for a while, he shook his head slightly. I'm sorry, I can't do that. It wasn't because he was merciful. It was because he knew not all the people of Jojo were like him. At least, the Red Blood Palace and the Blessed and Heavenly Lands had never regarded them as a member of a different race. A part of them didn't mean everything. What a disappointing and unsurprising answer. The glittering jewel mortal fairy smiled and shook her head. There was no more hesitation in her eyes. Her red eyes were filled with coldness and indifference. Then, you can die now. The glittering jewel mortal fairy sighed softly. Then, she raised her head and looked at the sky. Suddenly, the huge eye with a radius of 100,000 miles shattered into countless pieces with a crack. Then, the glittering jewel mortal fairy pointed her finger at Su Yu. A strand of mortal fairy's strength appeared in an instant. However, right at this moment, several silver sword lights appeared from the void. They blocked the glittering jewel mortal fairy's strength from different angles. Looking at the familiar sword formation, the glittering jewel mortal fairy withdrew her mortal fairy's strength. Then, she said calmly, This sword formation again? It's a pity that times have changed. Kai. The trisolar sword formation was activated immediately. The three swords pierced through the void with endless sword energy. However, this time, the glittering jewel mortal fairy had a sarcastic smile on her face. Then, she reached out her jade-like fingers and caught a long silver sword that was piercing through the void. At the same time, her eyes widened. The other two silver swords were frozen in the void. They were trembling, but they couldn't move forward anymore. Su Yu's face changed slightly. She had become stronger, much stronger. However, the glittering jewel mortal fairy's indifferent face changed abruptly. She flicked away the heavenly orchid silver bamboo sword. Then, she stepped back abruptly. At the moment when she stepped back, a strand of pitch-black thunderbolt jumped out from the heavenly orchid silver bamboo sword. It was winding along the sword hilt like a snake's tongue. Tribulation of Thunder God. The glittering jewel mortal fairy's blood-red pupils constricted. She couldn't believe it. As a deity, she didn't know how horrible the tribulation of Thunder God was. Even a peak mortal fairy couldn't withstand it. Now, her strength was still at the level of a mortal fairy. She didn't dare to touch the tribulation of Thunder God. If she hadn't reacted quickly, she would have been plotted against by this guy. You knew the sword formation wouldn't work on me, so you prepared a backup plan? Or, your sword formation and the tribulation of Thunder God were prepared for me from the very beginning? The glittering jewel mortal fairy was annoyed. She had tried to spare Su Yu's life many times. However, he always tried to put her in danger. Traces of dangerous light revolved in the depths of her eyes. The sword formation and the tribulation of Thunder God were indeed prepared in case of emergency. However, the target was not you, but another dangerous existence. Su Yu's eyes flickered. Then, he stepped on the formation under his feet. Your Excellency, you should have seen enough of the show. If you want to use the teleportation formation, shouldn't you put in some effort? The glittering jewel mortal fairy frowned. Who are you talking to? Su Yu had been guarding against this person all along. Chapter 1092. The light flickered a few times before it became a small, blood-red figure, which was only the size of a palm. The figure's face could be seen clearly. There was a pair of sharp black horns on the top of his head, and his fangs could be seen on both sides of his mouth. His eyes were blood-red like the glittering jewel mortal fairy's, which made him look extremely ferocious. At this moment, the short old man was sizing up the glittering jewel mortal fairy with great interest, with a faint smile on his face. Lin Lang's pretty face changed slightly when she saw him. You are the demonic god of withered bones? Heh, it seems you still remember me, the demonic god of withered bones said with a smile. Hearing that, the crowd burst into an uproar. This man was also a demonic god. The people of the central prefecture who were trapped within a radius of 100,000 miles turned pale. The glittering jewel mortal fairy had a complicated look in her eyes. She clenched her fists slightly and said in a low voice, "Why are you in Jojo? And why are you only left with your soul and your celestial energy sphere?" Her pair of crystal-like eyes flickered with a strange light. "You don't need to know that," the demonic god of withered bones sneered. The two of them kept talking. They didn't look like they were from the same race. Instead, they seemed to have a subtle relationship that was hard for outsiders to know. "Do you need help? After all, we are old acquaintances," Linlang said with a faint smile as she twirled a strand of white hair in front of her chest. Silent murderous intent filled Linlang's face, which made people feel slightly uneasy. "He, you don't seem to be in a better situation. Your body has been taken away, and only your celestial energy sphere is left in this weird body. You'd better take care of yourself," the demonic god of withered bones said indifferently. The two of them stared at each other. Even the outsiders could feel the bursting murderous intent between them. Just like that, the glittering jewel mortal fairy even left Suyu aside and stared at the demonic god of withered bones coldly. The demonic god of withered bones just sneered as if he was calm and composed. Seeing the two of them were about to fight, the demonic god of withered bones seemed to sense something. Suddenly, he glanced at the heavenly king and said anxiously, "To tell you the truth, I have been chased all the way here. They are already outside Jojo. I need to use the divine-level transportation portal to leave this place quickly and find a place to hide. If you don't want them to find you'd better leave quickly." After he finished speaking, he retreated and flew to the transportation formation. His eyes were fixed on Linlang, not relaxing in the slightest. "Who's chasing after you?" Linlang's expression changed. The demonic god of withered bones looked beyond the sky again with an even more anxious expression. "Who else do you think is chasing after a demonic god?" "It's them." Linlang was in disbelief. The demonic god of withered bones shouted, "It's up to you whether you believe me or not. I'm going to leave this place immediately. You can wait here if you want to die, but don't drag me down with you." As he spoke, he casually waved a few crystal stones, preparing to activate the divine-level teleportation array. Linlang's expression kept changing. After a while, she shook her head and said coldly, "I still can't let you go with him." Whoosh! She attacked as soon as she said she would. She swatted at him from afar, and Suyu was included in her attack range as well. "Idiot!" The demonic god of withered bones was enraged. With a point of his left hand, he easily shattered the space lock of 100,000 square miles. At the same time, he grabbed Suyu's shoulder armor with his right hand and teleported him away. Then, a blood-red tentacle shot out from the surface of his body. It was shaped like a long whip, and it shattered half of the void of the central prefecture city. The void appeared suddenly. Not only did it devour the power of the glittering jewel mortal fairy's palm, but even half of the central prefecture city was not spared. It was sucked into the space vortex, and there were countless casualties. Without waiting for the demonic god of withered bones to exert his strength again, Linlang snorted coldly, and her silver teeth gleamed with icy light. "Looks like you're extremely weak. I'm afraid even the divine Laksana has been destroyed. Haha, the heavens are on my side. You deserve this." Boom! The sky cracked open, and an incomparably huge figure suddenly appeared. It was 10,000 feet tall, and its shape was clear. It was a demonic god whose entire body was red. Suyu's pupils shrank when he saw it. Wasn't that the glittering jewel demonic god who was sealed in the Marshall Tower? How could it appear? However, Suyu soon discovered that it was just a virtual shadow, a divine Laksana. The body of the demonic god looked down on the common people indifferently, and a pair of blood-red eyes shot towards the demonic god of withered bones with indifference. The body of the demonic god of withered bones, which was condensed by the bloody light, suddenly vanished, and several drops of golden blood spurted out from his mouth. That golden blood was God's blood that was filled with God's source. Suyu's eyes were filled with excitement as he stared at the 3 drops of golden blood that fell to the ground. Unfortunately, the demonic god of withered bones had grabbed them, and it was inconvenient for him to collect them in public. "Linlang, do you really want to fight to the death with me?" The demonic god of withered bones wiped the golden blood from the corner of his mouth and bellowed. Linlang's face was frosty, as if she had an irreconcilable hatred for him. It's all thanks to you that I've ended up like this. I couldn't kill you before I became a deity, and I still can't kill you after I become a deity. Now that the opportunity is right in front of me, how can I miss it? Without another word, Linlang struck again. The divine Laksana in the sky moved along with her figure, and as it moved, a vision of heaven and earth appeared. In an instant, the land within a million perimeter was emptied, and it became a forbidden land. The earth veins hidden deep under the earth were drained of energy, and they became dead veins. The central prefecture city was originally a treasured land full of spiritual energy, but the divine Laksana struck twice and turned the place into a barren land of spiritual energy, and the earth veins became extinct. It would take at least 100 years for it to recover. If the royal beast state became a forbidden land, it would be similar to what was happening now. After suffering another blow from the divine Laksana, the demonic god of withered bones resisted with difficulty. He groaned, and a drop of golden blood flowed out. Suyu was so excited that his eyes shone brightly. However, the demonic god of withered bones hissed and sucked the divine blood back, which disappointed Suyu. However, no one picked up the 3 drops of divine blood on the ground. With the benefits of the divine dragon's blood, how could Suyu not know what kind of treasure divine blood was? He wouldn't trade it for 100 low-grade fairy artifacts. Seeing that he was no match for Linlang, the demonic god of withered bones was furious and resentful. He turned to stare at Suyu and yelled anxiously, "Brat, you and I are now in the same boat. Linlang is too strong, and I'm no match for her. Her body is with you, right? Give it to me, and I will have the ability to kill her." Yun Yazi once said that the body of the glittering jewel demonic god could be controlled by the soul and celestial spirit as long as it was a deity. It could unleash power that surpassed that of a mortal fairy and was second only to that of a deity. The demonic god of withered bones was only left with a remnant soul and celestial spirit, so he could indeed occupy the body of the glittering jewel demonic god. "Don't be fooled." Linlang was shocked when she heard that, and she yelled hurriedly. However, when she looked at Suyu, she heaved a sigh of relief. With Suyu's intelligence, how could he not understand the stakes? Her expression softened, and Linlang said, "Suyu, this is a war between me and withered bones. I hope you won't get involved." How could Suyu not understand the logic behind it? Since he refused to hand over his body to Linlang, he naturally wouldn't hand it over to another unfamiliar demonic god. Suyu rolled his eyes and said, "My life is in his hands, and it's not up to me. I'll take out my body, and you two can fight it out." "No way." "All right." Withered Bones and Linlang spoke in unison. One looked anxious, and the other was overjoyed. Suyu was in the hands of Withered Bones. If he took out his body, who could seize it first? Moreover, Withered Bones was a pure soul body, and it would be easy for him to occupy the demonic god's body. On the other hand, Linlang not only had a body, but she had also integrated with another soul of the same origin not long ago. It would take a lot of time to integrate with the demonic god's body, so how could she compete with Withered Bones? The demonic god of Withered Bones standing in front of you is one of the most ruthless demonic gods of the human race. He's 10,000 times more ruthless than I am. If you release the demonic god's body, you'll lose your value and will be killed immediately. Now that you have the demonic god's body, he still has some reservations and won't dare to attack you. You have to think carefully. Linlang's pretty face was full of anxiety. Suyu couldn't help but roll his eyes. "You have the cheek to say that others are ruthless, but I don't remember you ever being kind." Linlang was stunned, and said hatefully, I haven't touched a single hair of yours, have I? Devouring souls and hearts is also to replenish vitality, but he's different. He kills humans for fun. Brat, I can swear to the inner demon that if I hand over the demonic god's body, I won't make things difficult for you. How about that?" The hideous face of the demonic god of Withered Bones revealed a hint of cunning. "Besides, if she kills me, wouldn't it be a piece of cake for me to drag you down with me?" Upon hearing that, Suyu's eyes flickered incessantly, as if he was deep in thought. After a while, Suyu gritted his teeth. "I've made up my mind. I'll hand over the demonic god's body. When he finished speaking, Suyu hit his chest with his palm, and a bronze-colored tower appeared in his palm. With a shift of thought, the 100th story of the ancient tower opened abruptly. All of a sudden, the demonic god of withered bones was overjoyed. He could clearly sense the aura of the demonic god's body. I'll release it, Suyu bellowed. He rubbed the martial tower with both hands, and an astonishing mass of demonic energy surged out. Linlang was furious. She couldn't care less about killing the demonic god of withered bones anymore. She teleported over to snatch the demonic god's body that had flown out. The demonic god of withered bones couldn't help but burst into laughter. With a press of his 5 fingers, he pinned down the massive demonic energy that was surging out and grabbed it in his palm. Ha ha ha, Linlang, I won't hold back with your body. All of a sudden, the demonic god of withered bones let out a muffled groan, and an old hand reached out from the demonic energy and pressed down on his skull. With a cracking sound, the soul body of the demonic god of withered bones was shattered abruptly, turning into innumerable fragments. Along with fist-sized drops of golden blood, the demonic god of withered bones teleported 100,000 feet away and reformed into a blood-colored human figure. However, he was obviously much weaker than before. His hideous face was filled with shock and anger. Who is it? An old figure stepped out from the demonic energy with his hands behind his back, staring at the demonic god of withered bones before him with indifference. The demonic god of withered bones sized him up, and his face darkened abruptly. This person was also a divine soul with godly spirit. Linlang stopped in her tracks, and an imperceptible sneer appeared at the corners of her lips. She glanced at Suyu approvingly. This kid really had an endless stream of tricks up his sleeves. When Suyu was about to release the body of the demonic god, she knew that Suyu was up to no good. Her anxious behavior just now was merely to cooperate with Suyu's act to lure the demonic god of withered bones. She didn't believe that Suyu would really release the body of the demonic god. Another remnant soul of a demonic god, Yunyazi said dispassionately as he stared at the demonic god of withered bones. The demonic god of withered bones stared at the old man in front of him, extremely fearful. His attack just now had failed to kill him, which meant that the strength of this divine soul was limited. However, it was still extremely tricky to deal with. If he joined forces with Linlang, his godly spirit might be extinguished today, and he would perish completely. Who are you? The demonic god of withered bones asked anxiously. Yunyazi glanced at him and Linlang, and then took a few steps back, shielding Suyu behind him. He said placidly, "It doesn't matter who I am, but I don't want to get involved in the grudge between you two. You can decide for yourselves." As he spoke, he brought Suyu onto the transportation portal and activated it. The demonic god of withered bones heaved a sigh of relief. He stared at the transportation portal, his eyeballs rolling. Linlang wanted to say something but stopped on second thought. She wanted to stop Suyu from leaving, but she didn't move in her hesitation. If Yunyazi was forced to stay, he would definitely join forces with the demonic god of withered bones to fight her together. It was better for her to deal with the demonic god of withered bones alone before dealing with Yunyazi. After weighing the pros and cons, Linlang stared at the transportation portal but didn't move to stop it. 3 breaths, and the transportation portal would be completed. 2 breaths. 1 breath. Chapter 1093. The glittering jewel mortal fairy's eyes turned cold. How could she allow him to escape? He sneered, and his Dharma idol suddenly pounced forward. In an instant, its divine might covered the sky, and it was as if the sky itself was about to crush the demonic god of withered bones to death. At the same time, the god-tier teleportation formation was also within range. Yunyazi's expression turned solemn. With a sudden wave of his right robe, a mysterious force swept up and actually enveloped the area around the teleportation formation. When the Dharma idol pressed down, crackling sounds could be heard in the vicinity of the teleportation formation, and transparent cracks could be seen everywhere. It was unknown what method Yunyazi used. He was clearly standing in the middle of the formation and using his divine art, but he did not disturb the operation of the formation at all. Finally, the transportation portal was successfully activated. With a flash of light, Suyu was successfully transported away. When he was about to be transported away, Su Yu's eyes shone brightly, and he swept away the 3 drops of divine blood that were left on the ground. The Dharma idol suddenly pressed down, and the demonic god of withered bones roared fiercely. Golden liquid flowed out of his body and covered the surface of his body. In the blink of an eye, he had turned into a small golden person that was bitterly supporting the Dharma idol. However, the god blood on the surface of his body continued to evaporate, and the amount of golden god blood in his body decreased at a speed visible to the naked eye. It seemed that he could not hold on for much longer. The glittering jewel mortal fairy couldn't help but laugh out loud. Ha, 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 withered bones, I will take your celestial energy sphere today to relieve my hatred. After saying that, he was about to activate his Dharma idol to completely destroy it. But at that moment, a shocking divine power descended from the sky, condensing into a divine sword that was 10,000 feet long. It came from beyond the sky and slashed straight at the 2 demon gods who were fighting. Skeleton's expression changed drastically. Yes, they're here. The glittering jewel mortal fairy's smile froze on her face. She was also shocked. They really came. The divine sword destroyed more than half of the space in the central continent city. The huge tremor caused the space of the entire 9 provinces to shatter, as if it was about to be torn apart by the sword. The glittering jewel mortal fairy gritted her teeth and gave up on killing dry bones. She suppressed the fear in her heart and controlled the divine Laksana to attack the divine sword. The Dharma idol roared furiously, and its hands, which seemed to be able to support the heavens, ruthlessly slammed down. However, the might of the divine sword was incomparably vast and mighty. Even the powerful divine Laksana Dharma idol was destroyed by the sword and split into 2 halves from head to toe. The glittering jewel mortal fairy's face turned pale, and she opened her mouth to spit out a mouthful of golden blood. Her body exploded with a loud rumble and was torn into pieces. All that was left was a miniaturized version of the demonic god, which was only half as tall as Su Yu. Holding the jar of golden blood, which was the size of a jar, he tore the void and teleported away in terror. The demonic god of withered bones took advantage of the instant the Dharma idol clashed with it to escape without a trace. Sure, not long after, 2 beams of divine light descended from the sky, revealing 2 spirit bodies. Both of them had abnormally young appearances. Such a solid soul body was at least at the level of a mortal fairy. It's a pity that the secular sword god's sword failed to kill dry bones. He escaped. The young man on the left had wheat-colored skin, and his eyes were filled with arrogance. The young man on the right was a handsome, fair-faced young man who was holding a small golden fan in his hand. He smiled gently and said, if the secular sword god had attacked him in person, dry bones would have been killed too. It's a pity that he couldn't do it in person and only sent his doppelganger. Moreover, a demonic god was hiding here. If she hadn't decisively sacrificed the divine Laksana idol, I'm afraid the 2 demonic gods would have been killed. Well, the female demonic god was also seriously injured. Both of them escaped. Let's split up and chase after them, the arrogant young man said. The gentle young man agreed, okay, I'll continue to chase after dry bones. You can take care of the female demonic god. The 2 of them didn't chase after them immediately. Instead, they glanced around. Let's find a body to attach our soul to first. Alas, I can't use my physical body to travel to the world cavern to enforce the law. I have to seize someone's body every time. The gentle young man sighed helplessly as he glanced around the entire central prefecture city. The attack just now had destroyed the prosperous central prefecture city into ruins. Fortunately, the people of the central prefecture were scared away by the previous battle, so there were not many casualties. Is there no one here? The gentle young man frowned slightly. Suddenly, his eyes lit up. His gaze traveled millions of miles and found a frightened figure running away. He smiled and said, I'll borrow your body for the time being. He didn't move at all, but he waved the small golden fan in his hand. Millions of miles away, the Heavenly Knife Region Master, who was looking at him in surprise, was suddenly swallowed by a space power. Then, a void appeared in front of the gentle young man, and he fell out of the crack. The Heavenly Knife Region Master was startled by the fact that he could easily teleport an all-creations expert at the peak of the Heavenly Knife Region. He asked in horror, "Who are you?" The gentle young man smiled and didn't say anything. His figure flashed into the Heavenly Knife Region Master's body. Then, a frightened and angry soul was forcibly squeezed out of the Heavenly Knife Region Master's body. His body was seized. And it was seized by force. The Heavenly Knife Region Master was terrified. He didn't even want to ask for his body back. He turned around and ran away. At the same time, the arrogant young man also caught a person. It was the old Region Master, who didn't have time to escape. He occupied the old Region Master's body in the same way. The old Region Master's soul was forcibly squeezed out of his body. He screamed and ran away. The arrogant young man showed a mocking smile. He punched the old Region Master's soul, who was at the peak of the all-creation realm, was smashed into pieces without a sound. The gentle young man frowned and said, "Why do you have to kill him? After all, he is a creature of JoJo." The arrogant young man didn't care. He said, "Anyway, this is a cavern world where a deity fell. The deity is dead. Without the protection of a deity, it doesn't matter if we kill him. Besides, it's not convenient for us to expose our identity. It's better not to let others know about us." The gentle young man sighed silently. He tore the space apart and ran away. The arrogant young man snorted disdainfully as he stared at his back. Then, he also left to pursue the glittering jewel mortal fairy. The central prefecture city was reduced to ruins in one day. The two great demon tribes appeared and fought. Finally, a mysterious expert came to the JoJo continent. This news spread to all corners of JoJo like a tide. In the eastern continent, in a luxurious city, in the transmission hall, the divine-level transmission portal, which had been silent for several days, suddenly lit up. The All-Creations old monster guarding the side was a woman whose cultivation was as high as stage 6 All-Creations. She was dressed in a long silk skirt and had a purple waistcoat draped over her body. She looked elegant and dignified, and her temperament was tranquil. She sat cross-legged and cultivated silently. Suddenly, the transmission portal trembled slightly and flashed with crystal light. The woman opened her crystal eyes and was slightly surprised. "Oh! From the Central Prefecture? No martial artist from the Central Prefecture has come to the Eastern Continent for 2 days." She was just a little surprised. Then, she closed her eyes gently and continued to cultivate as if nothing had happened. She didn't care who was coming. In the halo, Suyu's figure gradually appeared. A long-lost feeling of dizziness hit him. The super-long transmission, which lasted for an hour, was really uncomfortable. However, Suyu had no time to care about it. His face was a little pale. Soon after he was teleported, the space of the whole JoJo continent shook violently. The transmission channel of the divine-level transmission portal was cut off by a divine power. The huge space turbulence rolled in. The situation was very dangerous. It was Yunyazi who stopped in the space channel and resisted the space turbulence, giving Suyu a chance to successfully teleport away. He had successfully arrived at the Eastern Continent, but Yunyazi was still in the void, and it was unknown whether he was alive or dead. What happened? Why is there a large area of space turbulence? Suyu's heart was filled with guilt. All he cared about was Yunyazi's safety. If he died in the space turbulence because of this, his life would be ugly and he would feel extremely guilty. Boy, don't let your imagination run wild. Your old master is a great person. If he died in the space turbulence, it would be a big joke. The evil god's mocking tone sounded in his mind. He spoke so confidently that Suyu was dubious. However, thinking of Yunyazi's mysteriousness, Suyu was a lot more relieved. Well, I will wait nearby for a day. If he can come in time, he should meet up with me, Suyu said in his mind after thinking about it. The evil god didn't care. He turned around and laughed. Boy, I won't stand on ceremony with the feast you sent me. Tens of thousands of souls, TSK, it's really delicious. A trace of helplessness and worry appeared on his face. Absorbing the souls of tens of thousands of people was absolutely not what Suyu wanted. This would naturally strengthen the evil god, and it would be greatly strengthened. Although the soul space was solid, it might not be able to continue to trap him after he finished absorbing these souls. You weak gods, do you like to devour the souls of living creatures so much? Suyu said, a little disgusted. The glittering jewel mortal fairy, the demonic god of withered bones, and even the evil god all relied on souls to restore their vitality. The first two also devoured hearts. What's not easy to understand? The souls of the living creatures in the cavern world are all created by the gods with the celestial energy sphere. They are very pure. Devouring the souls of living creatures is equivalent to replenishing the celestial energy sphere. Although the quantity is small, it accumulates. Otherwise, how could glittering jewel become so powerful? It is because she devoured the souls of the living creatures in the entire royal beast state to replenish the huge celestial energy sphere. The evil god said matter-of-factly. A trace of anger flashed in Suyu's eyes, and he said in a low voice, "What do you gods think of living creatures as?" "Ah, it's probably a supplement." The evil god chuckled. "You don't have to be angry. When you have the ability to create life, your attitude towards life will change. In the eyes of most gods, the so-called life is actually a weak source of God. They can be created at any time and can be recycled at any time. Well, the sacred Kylin of Jojo also has the same attitude. In his eyes, life is actually celestial energy sphere. That's why he has no qualms about killing the geniuses of Jojo." Hearing this, Suyu felt helpless. The creator of life was indifferent to life, and the sacred Kylin was not spared. He always remembered that the sacred Kylin once said that killing the geniuses of Jojo was for their own good. The glittering jewel mortal fairy also agreed that killing them was for their own good. Suyu seemed to have a rough idea of what this sentence meant. "Why don't you go? The divine level transmission portal is of great importance, and you can't stay for long," the woman in luxurious clothes said calmly without opening her eyes. Suyu jumped down from the transmission portal, cupped his fists, and left. "I will leave now." After leaving the transmission hall, Suyu squinted at the transmission portal, and a space nail in his sleeve flashed away. When Suyu left, the woman in luxurious clothes looked at Suyu's back. She glanced at him casually, but her crystal eyes froze. This back, could it be? Chapter 1094. However, when the woman chased after him, Suyu was nowhere to be seen. In the crowd, a sage-like old man quietly turned his head and stared at the teleportation hall. He saw the woman's expression and movements as she chased after Suyu. Did the Central Prefecture's king's arrest warrant spread to Jojo? Suyu thought to himself. Fortunately, he was vigilant and used the power of time to change his appearance as soon as he left the hall. Otherwise, it would be troublesome to provoke an old monster at the peak of all creations. Suyu found an inn and waited quietly for Yunyazi. If he was safe and sound, he should be able to follow Suyu's scent. If he was in trouble, shaking his head, Suyu took out 3 drops of golden blood. It was the divine blood of the demonic god of withered bones. Staring at the divine blood, Suyu's eyes were full of joy. He placed it on his forehead. Suddenly, the divine 9-dragon cauldron in the depths of his soul seemed to sense it and sucked the 3 drops of divine blood into the cauldron. There was only a thin layer of red liquid left, but now there was a little more. Suyu frowned. A drop of divine dragon blood made the divine 9-dragon cauldron have an extra layer of diluted divine blood, about 1/10 of the cauldron's capacity. Why did 3 drops of divine blood only increase the diluted divine blood by 1/10? Thinking of the divine dragon mentioned by the evil god, Suyu was relieved. There was strong and weak divine blood. He stared at the divine 9-dragon cauldron expectantly, and it did not disappoint him. The divine 9-dragon cauldron shook and overflowed with some diluted divine blood. When it overflowed the emerald dragon, it crystallized 1/3 of the dragon's body again. Including the last time, it was 2/3 crystallized. Waves of warmth came from his heart, and the emerald dragon swimming in his left palm became brighter and clearer, emitting crystal brilliance. At the same time, a strange message came into his mind. The heart of eternity. Suyu was confused at first, but his eyes were gradually filled with surprise. Looking inside, he could clearly see that Suyu's heart had become an emerald green crystal, beating constantly and filled with unimaginable vitality. Even Enmu's fountain of life was far less vigorous than this heart. Moreover, once consumed, it could be produced continuously unless the heart was broken. With the support of such a heart, Suyu no longer had to worry about turning back time. The crystallization of the dragon of life in such a short time is closely related to the acquisition of the divine blood. This step was the right one, Suyu said in relief. As he continued to inspect his body, Suyu discovered that there were two other forces in his body. Part of it was familiar dragon power, while the other part was unfamiliar. The dragon power that was produced once again should be the diluted dragon blood from before, which was integrated into Suyu's bloodline along with it. As for the unfamiliar power, it was the demon god's power contained in the demon god's blood. Of the two powers, one could clearly feel that the dragon force was superior. The power of the demon god was sloppy and ordinary, but it was still far superior to human strength. In addition, the god's blood had brought a large amount of energy into his dantian. After the energy expansion of the divine dragon's blood last time, Suyu's dantian had expanded to 80 times the size of an ordinary 9th-grade fairy's. Hence, the energy that surged into his dantian this time could be easily accommodated, and the situation of his dantian expanding rapidly did not occur again. In the future, I will search for the divine blood at all costs and excavate the potential of the divine 9-dragon cauldron, Suyu thought to himself as he stroked his chin. After a short rest, Suyu took out the 9 dragons' devil subduing art and the 5 elements divine prison. Before the god's tribulation, he had tried to break through on the spot. However, there was an invisible will interfering, so he couldn't break through and wasted the effect of the honey of 100 flowers. However, the cultivation of the two was only a hair's breadth away. Suyu calmed himself down and entered the state of time acceleration, striving to break through both in one day. As dusk approached, Suyu's body was surrounded by a faintly discernible demonic energy. A pair of indistinct black horns appeared on top of Suyu's head, and his face seemed to be changing into that of the demon race. Suyu, who was in a deep state of meditation, was unaware of all this. Fortunately, these abnormalities disappeared quickly, leaving no trace behind. After a while, Suyu's eyes opened and closed, and a mass of pitch-black demonic energy was emitted from his eyes. At first glance, it seemed that the demon race was cultivating here. Looking down at his chest, Suyu had a strange look on his face. In the past, when I successfully cultivated a demonic dragon, it would always be accompanied by a dragon's roar. Why is it so quiet now that I have mastered the cultivation technique? This place was in the middle of a busy market, and the isolation formation of the inn was not very advanced. Suyu could not use it in public. Yunyazi praised this cultivation technique a lot. I wonder what changes there are now that I have cultivated it to the top class. Suyu pondered. Yunyazi once said that this cultivation technique was not as simple as a mere legendary demonic technique, and that Suyu must cultivate it to the top class. Suppressing his eagerness to try, Suyu immediately calmed down and comprehended the 5 elements divine prison. Comprehending 100 demon inscriptions, one could control 10% of the power of the 5 elements divine prison. Now that he had comprehended 99 inscriptions, he still could not break through the last one. Staring at the last inscription, Suyu's mind was immersed in the inscription, comprehending the mystery within. Time passed by in a flash. At noon the next day, Suyu suddenly opened his eyes and raised his hand to grab the space in front of him. A grey light shot out from the void crack and was caught by his palm. A sneak attack. The evil god, who had been watching the outside world, was surprised. Suyu shook his head. No, it has master's breath. Opening his palm, there was a light spot that was transformed from a soul, carrying information. With a thought, he put it between his eyebrows, and Yunyazi's voice echoed in his mind. The divine sword of the outer sky, the broken Jojo, there is a mysterious thing outside Jojo. I will go to investigate, don't worry about me. Suyu opened his eyes and was slightly surprised. A mysterious thing had come outside Jojo. Why did his master go to investigate in person? However, after confirming that his master was not seriously injured, Suyu was much more relaxed. Holding the 5 elements divine prison in his palm, Suyu frowned and sighed deeply. Until now, there is still a thin film, and I can't comprehend the last bit. What am I missing? Suyu knew that maybe it had nothing to do with comprehension. He needed some extra help. Kid, tell me, your master is fine, right? What are you going to do next? Go directly to the Great Oriental family and find that two-faced little girl? The evil god laughed. Suyu shook his head, and a space nail fell from his sleeve. Before that, I still need to seal the divine-level transmission portal. The space nail was prepared for today's use. The evil god rolled his eyes. In order to prevent the Central Prefecture's king from chasing after us? Suyu's eyes flashed. Well, according to the current situation, my human tribulation is likely to happen to the Central Prefecture's king. Now that the heavenly tribulation has passed for 2 days, according to the interval of the 3-9 tribulations, it will be the human tribulation in 7 days, and I may meet him. The evil god said, "What good plan do you have?" As far as I know, whether it is the real 3-9 tribulations or the fake 3-9 tribulations, there is no escape. I think it will be difficult for you to persuade the Duanxian Cliffmaster to help you stop the Central Prefecture's king for 9 days. I didn't count on him. Suyu had expected it and sighed. The Central Prefecture's king hides most of his strength. Among the 11 dust fairies on the continent, his strength is the highest. The Duanxian Cliffmaster can't stop him for 9 days, but it should be enough to buy me a few days. And this space nail can prevent the Central Prefecture's king from rushing to Jojo in a short time, so it can buy me a few more days. Even for a dust fairy, it takes a day to cross a state, and at least 2 days to travel from the Central Prefecture to the Eastern continent. The evil god said, "So, you put your last hope on the little girl of the Great Oriental family?" "No." Suyu shook his head coldly. "I put all my hope on myself." Touching the space ring, Suyu's mouth showed a hint of coldness. "It doesn't matter if the human tribulation is not him, but if it is, I have a gift for him." Outside the divine-level transportation hall, the luxurious woman meticulously guarded the side of the formation, never leaving it. Her crystal eyes flashed with some regret. "It's a pity that I couldn't find Suyu again, otherwise." In the midst of contemplation, a young man with a silver mask stepped into the formation. The luxurious woman looked up and retracted her gaze as if nothing had happened. The silver-masked young man walked onto the divine-level transportation hall, arranged a few crystals, and was ready to activate the formation. Unexpectedly, at that moment, the silver-masked young man suddenly shot out a space nail from his palm and inserted it into the formation. Although the luxurious woman did not look sideways, she had been secretly watching the person who used the transportation hall. When she found that he used a forbidden item like the space nail, a trace of helplessness appeared on her tranquil face. She sighed softly. "Hey, why are there always ignorant people who try to block the divine-level transportation hall?" She was already a little numb to such actions. With a wave of her wide sleeves and light robe, a cool breeze blew, and the silver-masked young man was wrapped in the power of space, unable to move. The space nail in his palm was leisurely collected into the woman's palm. Her bright eyes glanced at the young man and gently shook her head. Who instructed, however, at that moment, a divine charm flowed over, and an invisible giant palm brushed past the place, breaking the power of space that sealed the silver-masked young man. The silver-masked young man took the opportunity to take out a second space nail from his sleeve and insert it into the formation. The luxurious woman was slightly angry. "How dare you?" She suddenly stood up, her face cold, and pointed in the air. In an instant, the amazing all-creation's power was like a landslide, and the silver-masked young man and the space nail were knocked away. Just as she was about to subdue him again, a power of space appeared, wrapping the silver-masked young man and the space nail, and teleporting them away. Humph! The luxurious woman's pretty face was cold. She tore the void with one hand and chased after the other teleported. What she didn't know was that not long after she left, waves of gloomy ghost energy gushed out from the ground. It was a clever and cute girl, but she was a member of the ghost clan. She looked around cautiously, and quickly went to the formation. She smiled, took out a space nail, and inserted it into the formation. However, at that moment, her face suddenly changed, and she looked up. She saw a cold face with a faint smile right in front of her. I've guarded the teleportation hall for many years. Do you think you can fool me with this little trick of luring the tiger away from the mountain? The cold face belonged to the luxurious woman who had left and returned. You're the mastermind behind this, right? Ghost Clan, humph. The luxurious woman's face turned cold, and she glared at Sheng Ji. Sheng Ji groaned, and she flew backward as if she had been hit by a heavy hammer. However, her reaction was extremely fast. She turned into a cloud of ghost energy and immediately disappeared into the depths of the ground. The luxurious woman stared coldly at the ground, as if she had seen through the escape rules hidden deep underground. Her gaze extended from the inside of the hall to the outside. With a cold snort, the luxurious woman stepped into the void and chased after Sheng Ji. Not long after she left, a sage-like old man walked into the hall with a faint smile on his face. Luring the tiger away from the mountain is indeed not worth mentioning. What if it's a series of luring the tiger away from the mountain? A space nail appeared in his palm. Su Yu's gaze turned cold, and he threw it towards the formation. However, just as the space nail was about to enter the formation, a smooth and fair palm suddenly reached out from the void and easily caught the space nail. The old man said calmly, "A series of luring the tiger away from the mountain is also not worth mentioning." Su Yu's face stiffened, and he stared at the fair palm. He said in a low voice, suddenly extending a hand, "Aren't you afraid of scaring me to death?" Chapter 1095. Appearing from the void, the noblewoman looked Su Yu up and down. She was sure that Su Yu was the real mastermind, and that the two people in front of her were just a smokescreen. Hearing Su Yu's words, she giggled. "Shouldn't you be feeling guilty that you've been seen through?" She was indeed a little curious. Su Yu had been seen through, yet he still dared to stand in front of her without running away. "I helped the great Oriental family test the security of the divine level spell formation. Why would you feel guilty?" This reason was too. Concealing the shock on her face, the luxurious woman did not know whether to laugh or cry. She looked Su Yu up and down, then said, "You're an interesting person. Forget it, I'll spare your life and send you to the great Oriental family to be interrogated." As she spoke, she was about to imprison Su Yu with the power of space. But Su Yu was not in a hurry. At close range, he suddenly activated Time Freeze and froze her. Although she was at the peak of all creations, she was still affected by the power of time and moved very slowly. "Haha, I've been tricked, aunt." Sheng Ji, who had clearly escaped, suddenly emerged from under the spell formation and slammed the space nail in her palm into the spell formation. Suddenly, the runes of the divine level transmission spell dimmed and extinguished. It could no longer function. The noblewoman wanted to stop her, but it was too late. She suddenly realized that this was their last resort. They had made her think that they had caught Su Yu, the real mastermind, so that she would let her guard down and take the opportunity to insert the space nail. Staring at the smug Sheng Ji, the noblewoman ground her teeth and looked extremely annoyed. "Who are you calling aunt? I'm only 200 years old." Sheng Ji's eyes widened. "All right, leave quickly." Su Yu rolled up his sleeves and took Sheng Ji back into the 9-jade spiritual pearl. He turned into a sharp arrow and shot into the crowd outside the hall. When 10 breaths had passed and the time freeze effect disappeared, the noblewoman regained her mobility. She glanced back at the divine level transmission spell that had completely stopped functioning. It seemed that it would take at least half a month for the spell formation to recover. "Bastard!" The noblewoman was furious. She stared in the direction that Su Yu had escaped and immediately gave chase. In the end, when he chased after Su Yu, he only found a piece of clothing with Su Yu's scent in an inn. Damn it! The luxurious woman burned her clothes to ashes with hatred. She formed hand seals and launched several hand seals into the void. Not long after, 9 figures of all creation stage 3 broke through the void and arrived. "Greetings, Lord Nan." The 9 of them bowed respectfully. The noblewoman raised her hand and pointed. Su Yu's portrait appeared in the void. An old man with long white hair and a sage-like demeanor appeared vividly on the paper. "Remember his appearance. Order the entire southern manor to arrest him. This person destroyed the divine level teleportation formation and has ill intentions. If discovered, arrest him immediately." The expressions of the 9 figures changed at the same time. They looked at each other in shock. To be able to destroy the teleportation array right under the eyes of the South Mansion mistress, just how powerful was that person? The luxurious woman's face turned red. How could she dare to say that she was plotted against? This person is proficient in time divine abilities and is extremely strange. We cannot be careless. Whoever carelessly lets this person escape will be punished according to the family rules. The 9 figures shuddered. It was actually the legendary time divine ability. No wonder even the South Mansion mistress failed. May I ask the South Mansion mistress if we need to inform the North Mansion to join us? The luxurious woman glared at her. Do you want them to come and watch us make a fool of ourselves? Keep it a secret until we catch the evil thief. Anne. I am going to the North Mansion now. There is something I need to discuss with the North Mansion. This matter will be postponed for the time being. The figures dispersed and joined the list of wanted criminals. This city was called the Eastern Holy City. It was the base of the Great Oriental family. In terms of scale, it was even more magnificent than the Central Prefecture. With the divine-level teleportation formation as the center, it was divided into 2. To the north was the North Mansion, and to the south was the South Mansion. The North Mansion and the South Mansion were both mansions of the Great Oriental family. Each was guarded by a strong mortal fairy. The 2 mansions jointly governed the Eastern Holy City. If it was not a major event, they would not interact frequently. At the moment, a white-haired old man stood at the gate of the North Mansion. Although he was huge, his temperament was like the clouds of the world. Boy, are you going to find the little girl of the Great Oriental family just like that? The evil god asked in Su Yu's mind. Su Yu nodded. Yes, the human ordeal is approaching, and I can feel the pressure from it. If Dongfang Tianfeng is really the key to resolving the crisis of the human ordeal, the pressure will naturally be relieved. As long as I see her, I can confirm whether she is the person I am looking for. If she is, I will plan for the future. If she isn't, I will just pay a visit and take my leave. The evil god laughed. Then why don't you be wary of that woman just now? She is responsible for guarding the formation, so she must be an important figure of the Great Oriental family. You rushed into the Great Oriental family. No matter how you look at it, you are walking right into a trap, aren't you? That's not necessarily true. Since I dared to come, I naturally investigated in advance. Su Yu smiled. That lady is the mansion mistress of the South Mansion, Dongfang Yu. This is the North Mansion. If there is no important matter between the 2 mansions, they will not send any important figures here. Don't worry too much. With a smile, Su Yu stepped forward to pay his respects. The guards at the door were 2 sweet-looking young girls. They saw Su Yu coming from afar and said with a smile, "Old senior, what can I do for you?" As he stared at the 2 beautiful young ladies, Su Yu felt that it was a little strange. It was such a big and influential family, yet the people guarding the entrance hall were not mighty and ferocious men. Instead, they were 2 beautiful and delicate young ladies. "Oh, I want to pay a visit to your noble family. Is it convenient for you?" Before he could finish, the lively young girl on the left giggled and said, "We already know your purpose. We can see it." Su Yu was stunned. Did they know he was here to visit Dongfang Tianfeng? "Old senior, there is an age requirement to enter the Great Oriental family. You must not be more than 30 years old." The 2 young girls smiled faintly. They did not expect such an old guy to come to the Great Oriental family so brazenly. Passers-by could not help but cover their mouths and chuckle. "Hey, look at that old guy. He's so old, but he's still here to flirt with women. He doesn't even try to hide it. Haha, it's rare. It's not like there aren't old guys who have their eyes on the women of the Great Oriental family, but it's rare to see one like this. Let's see how he gets kicked out." The street was noisy, but Su Yu did not deliberately listen to their voices. He touched his chin and said strangely, "There's an age requirement to visit the Great Oriental family? All right, when in Rome, do as the Romans do. Actually, I'm not that old. I'm probably only in my 20s. 20. The 2 young girls opened their mouths. Fortunately, They were members of the great Oriental family and had seen a lot. It was not surprising that they were surprised. Taking out a bronze round plate, the lively young girl pouted. "Try offering a drop of blood." Suyu did not think much of it. He offered a drop of blood essence and dripped it into the round plate. All of a sudden, the blood essence in the round plate was divided into dozens of blood threads, which condensed into a number. It was 20. "No problem. Go in, someone will take care of it for you." The lively young girl grabbed the round plate and put it on her waist, a playful look on her face. Suyu touched his cheek, feeling a little strange. As soon as they entered the house, a middle-aged woman of about 40 years old looked over and sized Suyu up. She said, "Come with me, there are 2 other young masters waiting for you." I'm not here to see some rich young master. Elder, I'm here to see." The middle-aged woman turned to look at him and snorted. "I know who you want to see. Listen to my arrangements." Huh. Did the women of the great Oriental family know how to predict the future? Confused, he was led into a living room by the middle-aged woman. There were 2 handsome young men in the living room, laughing and chatting. When they saw Suyu and his companions coming in, they immediately sat up straight and still, standing up to greet the middle-aged woman. The middle-aged woman nodded indifferently and sat down on the main seat. She stared at the 3 of them and said, "Thank you, young masters, for coming. I don't think I need to explain the rules of the southern residence. Whether you can meet Miss Dongfang will depend on your performance." "Miss Dongfang? Isn't that Dongfang Tianfeng?" Suyu heaved a sigh of relief. He was surprised that Dongfang Tianfeng's people could really predict the future and knew that he was looking for Dongfang Tianfeng. He was relieved and asked, "Elder, may I ask, what is the 9 fragrances?" The middle-aged woman and the 2 young masters couldn't help but look at him in surprise. I'm from the Central Prefecture," Suyu said. The middle-aged woman suddenly understood. "I see. Well, the 9 fragrances refers to the 3 major tests. Only those who excel in each test are qualified to meet Miss Dongfang." "Test?" Suyu was a little confused. Could it be that Dongfang Tianfeng had so many guests that he had to be tested before meeting her? "Come with me. The other young masters must have been waiting for a long time." The middle-aged woman stood up and walked through the back hall. The other young masters. Suyu's mouth twitched. However, he had come here after so many hardships. So what if he waited patiently? He only needed to look at Dongfang Tianfeng from afar to know if she was the person he was looking for. When he saw the other young masters, Suyu was stunned. Passing through the back hall, there was a huge backyard in the northern residence, complete with mountains, rivers, and pavilions. However, there were many people in the backyard, no less than 100, all of whom were young men with very high cultivation. Any one of these young masters would be considered rare talents in Jojo. 9th grade Almighty could be seen everywhere before the age of 20. There was even a young man in his mid-20s who had broken through to the All Creations level. Nowadays, Jojo's foundation was unprecedentedly weak, and it was extremely difficult to produce All Creations strong men. This person was 25 or 26 years old, obviously newly promoted. Suyu couldn't help but take another look at him. He was dressed in a green robe and had an arrogant look on his face. He was sitting alone in a pavilion, drinking by himself, not even looking at the people around him. The others didn't dare to come forward and fight for the pavilion with the best location. Even if there were some who lingered, they were mostly people who wanted to make friends. That's the top expert of the Eastern Continent's heavenly realm, Liu Chen. After training in the glittering jewel wonderland, he found an opportunity and broke through to the All Creations level. One of the 2 young masters who came with Suyu explained with a smile when he saw Suyu staring at Liu Chen. He said enviously, "Now, he can compete with the 4 great Starry Sky elites." It was obvious that they were a little curious about Suyu's background and wanted to make friends. In Jojo and the 5 continents, the Central Prefecture was the place where martial arts flourished the most. Liu Chen? Suyu had no impression of him. He was probably an inconspicuous 9th grade Almighty back then. "I'm Su Zhenlong. May I ask what are we doing here?" Suyu looked at the long line of young heroes. Even a fool would have realized that this was not just a visit to Dongfang Tianfeng. I'm Zhang Quan from the South City. It was Zhang Quan who took the initiative to talk to Su Yu. This is my dear friend, Wang Shuo from the North City. Wang Shuo cupped his fists and forced a smile. Brother Su, aren't you here to see Miss Dongfang? Zhang Quan stared at Su Yu in surprise. Su Yu nodded blankly. Yes, are these people here just to see Miss Dongfang's beauty? Upon hearing that, Zhang Quan and Wang Shuo looked at each other and couldn't help but laugh. Zhang Quan laughed. This is Miss Dongfang choosing her fiancé. Brother Su, don't tell me you're here by accident and don't know anything. Heh. Dongfang Tianfeng choosing her fiancé? No wonder the young girl at the door and the women in the mansion knew Su Yu's purpose so well. It would be strange if the young heroes who came at this time were not here to choose a fiancé. Su Yu opened his mouth and was speechless. However, since he was here, he had to find a way to get close to Dongfang Tianfeng first. I see. Su Yu smiled. Zheng Quan's eyes turned slightly. Where are you from in the Central Prefecture, Brother Su? You must be from the Central Prefecture, right? I heard that there are many heroes in the Central Prefecture. First there was the destined Emperor Zhong Wushuang, and then there was the Duobao fairy child Su Yuxian. TSK, just thinking about it makes one yearn for it. Brother Su, you must be a hero in the Central Prefecture, right? The Duobao fairy child? Su Yu couldn't help but laugh. After the great battle in the glittering jewel wonderland, he had been given such a title. However, the heavenly tribulation had destroyed most of Su Yu's treasures, leaving only 2 or 3 of them. He was even worse than an ordinary martial artist. Wouldn't Qiangbao fairy child be more appropriate? I come from the blessed and heavenly lands in the north of the Central Prefecture. It's a remote place. How dare I call myself a hero? Su Yu said modestly. Zheng Quan laughed. Brother Su, you're too modest. I can't see through your cultivation. I'm afraid you're an 8th grade almighty. Upon hearing that, Wang Shuo looked over from the corner of his eye. Su Yu's heart was as clear as a mirror. It turned out that the two of them thought Su Yu was a hero with a profound cultivation and an extraordinary identity in the Central Prefecture. They were testing Su Yu's background now. Haha, I broke through to the 9th grade fairy not long ago. I'm not even an almighty yet. How can I compare to you two? Su Yu revealed his meager strength truthfully. Zheng Quan's face froze. When he first saw Su Yu, he couldn't see through his cultivation, so he thought he was some big shot. In the end, Zheng Quan forced a smile and cupped his hands. I see. Well, since you're here, Brother Su, please take a stroll around the backyard. Brother Wang and I won't disturb you any further. Goodbye. As he spoke, he left in a hurry without looking back. Wang Shuo was dumbfounded. He stared at Su Yu, flicked his sleeves, sneered, and walked away. Su Yu shrugged his shoulders indifferently as he looked at their backs. He then turned to look at his surroundings carefully. He saw that the backyard was filled with restrictive spells. It was not impossible for Su Yu to barge in with his abilities, but it was impossible for him to avoid alerting the great Oriental family's experts. He was here to see Dongfang Tianfeng, so there was no need to make a scene. As Su Yu was glancing around casually, his face changed slightly all of a sudden, and he covered the 5 elements divine prison in his sleeve. A hint of surprise appeared in his eyes, and he stared in the direction he was looking at. It was a 5-colored mountain peak, located in the depths of the North Mansion. It was smooth and barren. At that moment, the 5 elements divine prison in Su Yu's sleeve vibrated slightly, as if it was responding to the 5-colored mountain peak. When it moved away from that direction, the 5 elements divine prison became calm again. Chapter 1096. Suddenly, a wisp of ethereal zither music drifted into their ears. It was as clear as a mountain spring, flowing through the quiet ancient rocks, making a tinkling sound. Hearing it, one's spirit was lifted, as if they were in a forest. The young heroes in the yard gradually stopped talking and listened to the ethereal music. Even Liu Chen, who was sitting proudly, looked over with a smile on his face. After the zither music was played, the young heroes kept praising it. Listening to your celestial music, This trip was not in vain. No matter how long I can see you, I have no regrets. This music should only exist in heaven. It's hard to find in the world. Good zither, good music, good beauty. Suyu sighed helplessly. The music was indeed extraordinary, but it would be an exaggeration to say that it was unique in the world. The young heroes were flattering her too much. On the peak of the five-colored mountain, a pretty maid gently pressed on the zither. She pursed her lips and mischievously looked back at the pretty girl behind her. She said with a charming smile, "Miss, those young heroes probably think that Miss is playing the zither. Who knows, they might be complimenting you right now." The beautiful woman behind her was leaning against the pavilion. Her snow-white dress fluttered in the wind, outlining her exquisite and fragrant body. Her slim waist, perfectly straight and long legs, revealed her absolute beauty to the fullest. The woman's face was very beautiful, and her eyes were like jewels, sparkling and translucent. Her eyes rippled with brilliance. At the moment, she was leaning against the pavilion. Her snow-white dress fluttered like a fairy, indescribably beautiful. Looking at the young heroes at the foot of the mountain, the woman in white looked a little worried and sighed. They are all people who love beauty and are greedy for riches. Ridiculous and pitiful. If you marry a chicken, follow the chicken. If you marry a dog, follow the dog. You know, you can test them. I'm tired. The woman in white closed her eyes and took a nap. Yuna covered her mouth and chuckled, and her eyes kept rolling. In the yard. The sound of the zither stopped, but the young heroes all became cautious and no longer talked casually. Because the sound of the zither was the beginning of the test. There were no rules about what the test would be. In the past, when the women of the great Oriental family were looking for a husband, they might be eliminated if they said something inappropriate or behaved improperly. Therefore, no one dared to make a ruckus before the results of the test were clear. Suyu glanced around and saw that there were many young elites around him. So, when no one was paying attention to him, he put on a silver mask to prevent people from recognizing him in advance and causing unnecessary trouble. Swish, swish, a cute and pretty little girl walked in from outside the restrictive spell with a scroll in her hand. Everyone puffed out their chests and couldn't help but stand up straight. The first test. The young girl chuckled and dragged out her tone, her eyes filled with craftiness. Climb that mountain. She pointed a finger at the mountain range beside her. Swish swish, as soon as he finished speaking, everyone looked at each other and immediately rushed to climb the mountain. Mountain climbing? Suyu paused for a moment, then flew up the mountain unhurriedly. He was puzzled. What kind of test is this? Then, let's go down the mountain, the pretty girl said after everyone had climbed up the mountain. Since he had climbed the mountain, he naturally had to descend the mountain. Most of the people rushed down the mountain in fear of falling behind. Suyu continued to walk down the mountain at a leisurely pace. Standing at the foot of the mountain, the pretty girl smiled and said, "Let's go up again." Up the mountain again? There was some hesitation in the crowd, but it was only for a moment. In order to avoid being eliminated, everyone rushed to climb the mountain. Suyu frowned slightly. Standing at the foot of the mountain, he looked at the crowd pushing and shoving each other and cursing angrily. He was a little unhappy. Are they toying with the blind date like a monkey? Closing his cold eyes, Suyu was calm and composed, not moving an inch. Go down the mountain, the young girl said with a smile, her round eyes involuntarily looking at Suyu. He was the only one who turned a deaf ear to her orders. Oh, go up again. The young girl withdrew her gaze and continued to look at the other people, a trace of contempt flashing in the depths of her eyes. Ah, go up again. Some of the young men were resentful. They hadn't even had the chance to meet their mistress, yet they had to listen to a servant girl's teasing. However, in the middle of the test, even though they were angry, they didn't dare to disobey. They suppressed their anger and continued to follow the orders. Going up the mountain, going down the mountain, repeating this process until some proud and arrogant people couldn't take it anymore and stopped obeying orders like Suyu. The test is over. The young girl smiled and pointed at Suyu and a few other young men who didn't listen to her orders. What's wrong with all of you? Do you know what it means to defy my orders? She presided over the test, and her status was equivalent to that of an examiner. She could eliminate all of them with a single word. Seeing the dissatisfaction on the young girl's face, the rest of the young men revealed looks of schadenfreude. They secretly heaved a sigh of relief. This test was really strange. However, when they thought about it, it was Miss Dongfang who was looking for a husband. If it was strange, then so be it. If they could win the beauty's hand in marriage, they would gain both fame and fortune. So what if they suffered a little? However, just as they were waiting for the young girl to announce that 10 people would be eliminated, the corners of the young girl's mouth curled up, revealing a sweet and lovely smile. Congratulations to the 10 of you for passing the first test. Please follow me for the second test. What? The faces of the onlookers, who were watching the show, more or less stiffened. They didn't follow the rules to pass the test, but they were eliminated despite being so obedient. Young girl, why is this happening? Can you tell me the reason? One of the young men was dissatisfied. He was quite strong, and he really didn't want to be eliminated in the first test. The cute young girl's face showed a hint of mockery. Miss is looking for a husband, not a yes-man who has no dignity. After saying that, she showed a lovely smile. But since you have come from afar, I can't let you down. Someone from the mansion will lead you to choose the Dongfang people you like. Leaving behind a group of dumbfounded and annoyed young men, the young girl led Su Yu and the others to another yard. Rather than saying it was a yard, it was more like a quadrangle. There was a boudoir in each of the 4 corners. It was red and fragrant, and it was obvious that it was a girl's boudoir. Clap, clap. The young girl clapped her hands, and a young girl came out from each of the 4 boudoirs. Their clothes were bright, and their bodies were light and graceful. Their faces were all beautiful. Every single one of them was a rare beauty, which made Su Yu's eyes light up. The other 9 people were also stunned. Only one beautiful woman was nothing special, but 4 appeared at the same time. Perhaps only a family with a profound background like the Great Oriental family could send out such a beautiful woman. The 4 beautiful women danced lightly. Their clothes were like clouds, and their faces were like flowers. It was a feast for the eyes. Su Yu didn't doubt them, and he enjoyed the dance to his heart's content. He nodded from time to time with a look of approval. However, the other 9 people looked tense. They didn't look like they were enjoying the dance. Instead, they looked like they were facing a great enemy, and they didn't dare to show the slightest emotion. This was because the second test had not yet begun. Well, the second test, let's evaluate them, the young girl said. Evaluate them? Everyone's mind was racing. The first test was a test of self-esteem. Could the second test be a test of temperament? They were the candidates for the young lady's husband. If they praised the other women, it would seem too frivolous and immature. Not bad, someone answered with an ambiguous answer. Be specific. Their appearance and dance. The young girl didn't allow him to find a loophole. He had no choice but to say, I only have the young lady in my heart. These women are just beautiful skeletons to me. Their dance and appearance have never entered my heart. What about you? The young girl asked them one by one. Most of them were similar to the first person. They kept in mind their status, and they didn't belittle the women present, nor did they praise them. Instead, they answered in a neutral manner. When it was Su Yu's turn, the young girl said, Tell me, what's your evaluation? Su Yu didn't think too much about it, and he answered honestly, the 4 women are all stunning beauties, and their dance is also very elegant. It's very rare to find such a combination in this world. The young girl stared at Su Yu in surprise, then continued to ask. It was unknown whether it was because they were influenced by Su Yu, but the next few people's answers were much more frank, and they praised them frequently. When the 10 people were done, the young girl pointed at the first 5 people, then smiled and said, Congratulations, the 5 people's hearts were finally at ease. During the first test, the young girl had also prioritized the people who had passed the test. Eliminated. The young girl's second half of the sentence came too late, and it caused the 5 people to stiffen. This time, without waiting for them to ask, the young girl snorted and said, You don't even know how to appreciate beauty. If the young lady were to follow you, wouldn't it be like marrying a piece of wood? Unqualified, eliminated. When the 5 people left resentfully, The young girl looked back and smiled. Young masters, please don't be impatient, I will ask the young lady. Leaving the 5 people behind, the young girl ran away. Brother Liu, I didn't expect you to answer so fluently, and you know the purpose of the young lady's test. This time, I'm afraid only the young lady can win the beauty. We congratulate you in advance, Zheng Quan said enthusiastically to Liu Chen, who was next to him. Wang Shuo, who was next to him, also squeezed out a bit of flattery on his serious face. In the next test, I think Brother Liu will definitely be able to surpass the others. These 2 people had actually passed the second test. Hearing that, Liu Chen showed a faint hint of arrogance at the corner of his mouth. He casually cupped his hands to return the greeting, but he glanced at Su Yu out of the corner of his eye. Zheng Quan and Wang Shuo's compliments were pleasant to hear, but Liu Chen didn't know that they could pass the second test because they had been warned by Su Yu. Although this test tested their temperament and made them ignore beauty, if they couldn't be magnanimous and flattered Miss Dongfang, they would also fall into the bottom of the test. If Su Yu hadn't reminded them, the 5 of them would have been eliminated because of their initial answers. Glancing at Liu Chen, Zheng Quan, and Wang Shuo's faces were a bit gloomy. They didn't expect that Su Yu, a country bumpkin, could pass the first test, and he even reminded everyone of the second test. As if noticing their eyes, Su Yu tilted his head and glanced at them. The 2 immediately turned their heads and pretended that nothing had happened. Wang Shuo even snorted softly to show his contempt and disdain. Old man, at your age, even if you are in front of the young lady, it will be difficult for you to be favored. Why don't you step down now? I am willing to compensate you with something extra. Liu Chen came over and said to Su Yu. The implication was that Su Yu was the most threatening, and Zheng Quan and Wang Shuo were not worth mentioning. This made the 2 people unhappy. Liu Chen cared about the country bumpkin they looked down on. Su Yu looked up and smiled lightly. Brother, I appreciate your kindness. Of course, I have no chance of winning the young lady's favor, but seeing the young lady's beautiful face makes this trip worthwhile. Liu Chen didn't care and nodded. I hope so. Chapter 1097. Swoosh. At that moment, the maid came back. Gentlemen, please follow me to the 5 Elements Mountain. The last test will be carried out in the mountain. The 5 Elements Mountain was the colorful mountain that caused the 5 Elements divine prison to vibrate slightly. Standing at the foot of the mountain, the reaction of the 5 Elements divine prison was more intense. If Su Yu hadn't put it into the 9 jade spiritual pearl in time, it might have flown out of his sleeve. The third test is to climb a mountain. This time it's really climbing a mountain. The girl blinked playfully. If you can climb to the top of the mountain, you can meet the lady. Who will be chosen by the lady in the end depends on whether you can please her. Looking up at the 5 Elements Mountain, Su Yu stepped up the mountain with curiosity. When the soles of his feet touched the 5 Elements Mountain, Su Yu felt his body become a little heavier. Then, he climbed up as if nothing had happened. Among the 4 people, Liu Chen was the only one who was fine. He just frowned and climbed up as if nothing had happened. But the faces of the other 3 people changed. When they stepped on the 5 Elements Mountain, they felt their bodies become 10 times heavier and it was extremely difficult to walk. Moreover, there was a prohibition on the 5 Elements Mountain. They couldn't fly, so they could only climb the mountain on foot. After a few steps, the 3 of them felt it was difficult to walk, and their foreheads were full of sweat. Zheng Quan said with difficulty, "This mountain is strange. It seems that one needs to cultivate the strength of 5 elements to climb it." Wang Shuo's face gradually turned pale. He nodded and smiled bitterly. Moreover, it is very likely that one needs to cultivate the strength of 5 elements to the middle stage, or at the level of all creations. Alas, it seems that only Liu Chen can win. We are all supporting characters. Zheng Quan smiled bitterly. What he said just now was right. It was Liu Chen who finally won the beauty. He raised his head subconsciously, but his face suddenly froze. Wait, how could he? Wang Shuo followed his gaze and took a deep breath in shock. He saw that Su Yu looked relaxed with his hands behind his back. He climbed the mountain as if he was walking on flat ground, without the slightest pressure. Most importantly, he was walking in front of Liu Chen. Liu Chen looked like he wanted to catch up, but the distance between them was getting farther and farther. This. Did he find some kind of trick? Wang Shuo was ashamed and annoyed. Even a level 9 fairy could climb the 5 Elements mountain and meet a beauty in a barren land. How could he, the sovereign of the Eastern continent, admit defeat? Gritting his teeth, Wang Shuo growled with a reddened neck and forced himself to climb the mountain. However, the higher he went, the stronger the energy of the 5 elements was. After taking 6 steps, the enormous energy of the 5 elements pressed down onto Wang Shuo, causing him to roll a few times on the staircase. In the end, he fell off the foot of the mountain and spat out a large mouthful of blood, causing him to be in an extremely sorry state. After trying 5 steps, Zheng Quan realized that he couldn't force himself any further and could only retreat with a bitter smile. As he raised his head and looked at Su Yu, who was halfway through, regret filled his heart. If he had known that Su Yu would have such an outstanding performance in the test, he would not have distanced himself from him in the beginning. I refuse to accept this. Wang Shuo's white teeth were stained with blood. Liu Chen ascended the mountain and took the beauty. He was completely convinced. Liu Chen was an extremely young all-creations strong practitioner. His talent was outstanding, and he could not compare to him. But what about Su Yu? He was just a trifling level 9 fairy, a wild lad from the desolate region. On the mountain, Su Yu walked with his eyes closed. The higher he went, the stronger the energy of the 5 elements was. Not only did he not feel pressured, but his eyes were full of joy. Under the energy of the 5 elements, Su Yu felt that in his mind, he had some inspiration about the understanding of the last demon inscription. Although it was weak, it was far better than painstakingly comprehending it. If he was given a few days to train on the mountain, he would definitely be able to break through the last obstacle and thoroughly comprehend the 100 demon inscriptions, thereby controlling the 5 elements' divine prison. With joy, Su Yu kept going up. The higher he went, the faster he walked. Gradually, he was like a gallop, leaving a series of afterimages on the mountain. The girl at the foot of the mountain was stunned. In her eyes, it did not seem like the energy of the 5 elements was suppressing him, but Su Yu was chasing after the stronger energy of the 5 elements. This guy's attainments in the 5 elements seemed to be extraordinary, the girl said in surprise. In the great Oriental family, there were no more than 10 people who could run like this on the 5 elements mountain. Immediately, her crescent eyes squeezed out a mischievous look. Hehe, Miss seems to be in trouble this time. Su Yu's mind was getting clearer and clearer, and he was getting closer and closer to breaking through the barrier of the last layer of comprehension. An indescribable sense of comfort surged into his heart, and he felt like he was walking on air. However, in the midst of the extreme comfort, the energy of the 5 elements around him disappeared, and the feeling of imminent enlightenment was forcibly interrupted. This feeling was like a man and a woman suddenly becoming impotent in the middle of the pleasure. Su Yu was annoyed. He opened his eyes and glanced around, only to realize with a bitter smile that he had already reached the top of the mountain. There was a seal on the top of the mountain that restrained the energy of the 5 elements. If only the energy of the 5 elements was stronger. Comprehending the demon inscriptions here would be twice the result with half the effort, Su Yu said regretfully. However, he did not forget the purpose of this trip. He opened his eyes and glanced around, wanting to see Dongfang Tianfeng in person. In the end, he did not see Dongfang Tianfeng. Instead, he saw a handsome young man standing on the top of the mountain. He was dressed in plain clothes, carrying a sword case on his back. His facial features were handsome, and his temperament was out of this world. At first glance, he looked like a celestial being from heaven. Upon seeing such an extraordinarily handsome and spirited person, Su Yu shuddered in fear. What the hell? Wasn't that him? The young man in front of him was none other than Su Yu himself. Upon closer inspection, Su Yu suddenly realized that it was just a virtual shadow created by the power of all creations. How could his virtual shadow appear here? Su Yu was anxious. Whoosh! There was a heavy gasp behind him as Liu Chen climbed up the mountain with difficulty. Looking at Su Yu's relaxed appearance, Liu Chen's eyes suddenly became fierce. He had never regarded Su Yu as an opponent, and he had full confidence in this marriage contest. Just now, when he persuaded Su Yu to leave, he had never really taken him seriously. In the end, he, a strong all creations, had such difficulty climbing the mountain, while Su Yu was extremely relaxed. A sense of crisis suddenly rose in his heart. But then, his eyes were attracted by the virtual shadow, and his pupils shrank fiercely as he cried out in horror, Su Yu. He was also in the glittering jewel wonderland that day, traveling with Dongfang Tianfeng. Su Yu did not know him, the number one expert in the region, but he knew Su Yu. In order to enter the martial tower, he had also submitted to Su Yu's Book of the Heart's Oaths. After witnessing Su Yu's various feats, he had long been in awe. Even the demon-devouring emperor, a Jojo talent, had been pinned to the ground and killed hundreds of times, let alone him. Even if he had broken through to the all creations, Liu Chen did not think he could defeat the little finger of this new generation of heaven rulers who had cut through the starry sky of Jojo. Therefore, as soon as he saw Su Yu, his heart felt weak. When he realized that Su Yu was a virtual shadow, Liu Chen breathed a sigh of relief and murmured, "So it's a virtual shadow." He recognized Su Yu's appearance as an old man, and he had also seen Su Yu's true appearance that had been transmitted from the central prefecture. Not only him, but as a peerless heaven ruler who had shocked Jojo overnight, a peak existence second only to the destined emperor, news of him spread extremely quickly. Especially among the younger generation, all challengers who had participated in the glittering jewel wonderland and witnessed Su Yu's divine power with their own eyes had inquired about Su Yu's true identity with awe. The ruthless demonic man who had once killed Xue Di was undoubtedly him. Moreover, the current Su Yu was far stronger than he had been in the past. Swoosh! All the seals in the mountain were activated, and the power of 5 elements was suppressed. The maidservant flew all the way up and announced with a smile, "Congratulations to the two of you for passing the 3rd test. Now, the 4th test begins." "Wait." Liu Chen stammered. "Why is there a 4th test? Aren't there only 3? The maidservant rolled her eyes at him. "There are 2 of you. Are you going to split the young lady in half and give her half to each of you?" "This." Liu Chen hesitated for a moment, took a light breath, and fixed his gaze on Su Yu. "It seems that a showdown is inevitable. Make your move." Without waiting for Su Yu's response, the maidservant said angrily, "Who told you that your opponents are each other?" Liu Chen pointed at Su Yu. "There are only the 2 of us here. If we don't challenge him, who should we challenge?" However, when he met the maidservant's half-smiling eyes, Liu Chen seemed to realize something. He twisted his neck with great difficulty, as if he was lifting a rusty metal puppet, and twisted it towards Su Yu. He took a deep breath and said, "Could it be that the 4th test is a challenge? A challenge to the treasure boy, Su Yu?" What he got was a harmless smile from the young woman. Yes, in the young lady's heart, there are 2 great heroes in the world, Zhong Wushuang and Su Yuxian. Oh, it's changed to Su Yu now. Only by defeating their virtual shadows can you gain the young lady's approval. Liu Chen's face was as pale as wax, as if he had been thrown into an ice cellar. His face was blue, and his whole body was stiff. After a long while, he said angrily, "Are you kidding me? How can I defeat him? He is a starry sky genius who can fight with the glittering jewel mortal fairy." The maidservant shrugged. "It's not like you are challenging the real person. A virtual shadow, it's just a virtual shadow. It probably only has about half of the real person's abilities." Unexpectedly, Liu Chen shook his head like a broken drum. No, even if it's only half of his abilities, I can't compete with him." Suddenly, he understood and said angrily, "Wait, your young lady doesn't want to find a husband at all, does she? She made such a difficult 4th test. Let me ask you, in this world, except for Zhong Wushuang or Su Yu himself, who can pass this test?" The maidservant pursed her lips and laughed secretly. He was right, the young lady didn't want to get married at all. However, under the pressure of the family, she had no choice but to make her own decision in the test and make the 4th test that no one could pass. In this world, among the men of the younger generation, apart from Zhong Wushuang, perhaps only Su Yu himself could pass this test. Thinking of this, the maidservant couldn't help but cover her mouth and giggle. This trick of the young lady is too cruel. It would be strange if these young talents who passed the test didn't go crazy. Where is the young lady? I want to ask her face to face. My sincerity was in vain, but in the end, I was played like this. I can't accept this. Liu Chen roared, obviously unwilling and extremely angry. The movement at the top of the mountain attracted the attention of a few people at the foot of the mountain. They went up the mountain one after another, and when they understood what had happened, they were also furious. Although they didn't have the chance to pass the last test, they still felt like they had been played. The maidservant, who was laughing just now, turned cold in the blink of an eye. You can't accept this. This is the Great Oriental family. If you can't accept this, you can sue them. The two of you only have one choice: challenge or give up. Answer within 3 breaths, or you will be considered to have given up. Chapter 1098. The maidservant did not dare to provoke him further. The women of the Great Oriental family had short lifespans because of the curse. To ensure the continuation of the family, they often recruited young talents to mate with the young women of the family. If this matter was made public, it would be detrimental to the recruitment of the women of the other families. Miss has gone to rest. If you succeed in the challenge, she will come out to meet you, the maidservant said. The maid muttered in her heart. The young miss really went to rest, because it was impossible for anyone to pass this trial. Okay, you have 3 breaths to choose. The maidservant thought for a moment and added, if you two give up, you can choose one of the 4 women in the second test as your fiancé. They are all unmarried and pure women. Although their status in the Great Oriental family is not as high as that of the 2 misses, they are more than enough to match you. Hearing this, Zheng Quan and Wang Shuo were tempted. The 4 stunning beauties were really rare, so it was not a big loss. If it were them, they would definitely choose to give up. Humph! How could Liu Chen bear this humiliation? As the saying goes, it is better to be the head of a chicken than the tail of a phoenix. Even if he was defeated by Su Yu's virtual shadow, he would never settle for the second best and receive the favor of Miss Su. Miss Dongfang, I, Liu Chen, will remember this, Liu Chen said fiercely as he raised his sword and slashed at Su Yu. He used all his strength in this strike, knowing that he would be defeated, so it was not a fancy move. Just like in the Martial Tower, Su Yu's virtual shadow copied the performance in the Martial Tower. He started with the Meteor Light Stream Great Formation, followed by the 5 Elemental Heaven Extinguishing Formation, followed by the Heavenly Orchid Silver Bamboo Sword. With a scream, Liu Chen could not resist 3 moves at all. He flew backward and fell to the ground, vomiting blood. He was filled with grief and indignation. The Great Oriental family had gone too far. At this moment, a helpless sigh was heard. I will give it a try, but I will make it clear in advance that I only want to meet Miss Su. As for the marriage, I see that Miss Su is unwilling. If you pass, I will not force you. The maidservant was surprised. If this guy was not here to become Miss Su's fiancé, then what was he doing here? But it was fine, Miss Su wanted it. Hehe, thank you for understanding, Miss Su. I thank you on behalf of Miss Su. The maidservant bowed and watched Su Yu's challenge with ease. In her heart, there was no other ending. Su Yu walked forward and smiled bitterly. He actually wanted to challenge his own shadow. How absurd. Looking at the virtual shadow, Su Yu walked forward without any preparation. Is he courting death? Su Yu's few moves can break through our defenses. If we don't take the initiative, we won't stand a chance at all. Zheng Quan opened his mouth, his face full of confusion. Wang Shuo sneered. It wasn't easy for him to get to this stage. Of course, he doesn't want to expose his lowly strength. Only by being defeated by Su Yu can he find a reasonable excuse for himself. Even the maidservant was puzzled. She had heard from her mistress that in order to defeat Su Yu's 3 moves, one had to grasp 3 points: speed, accuracy, and ruthlessness. He had to defeat Su Yu before the 3rd move, the sword energy. Otherwise, it would be impossible for him to win. She couldn't understand what Su Yu was trying to do, so she rested her chin on her hand and watched him with a playful expression. However, what happened next made them freeze. Su Yu had clearly walked over, but Su Yu's virtual shadow couldn't move at all. To be precise, it wanted to move, but it couldn't. It could be vaguely seen that the meteor light stream formation was constantly trembling. It wanted to operate, but it was fixed by some kind of power, unable to move. Just like that, Suyu walked over as if nothing had happened, and lightly slapped Suyu's virtual shadow with his palm, smashing it directly. On the summit, there was only the sound of the wind, and the rest was dead silence. Only Suyu didn't care. Of course, the one who knew him best was himself. Of course, only Suyu knew how to break the move. He could take the initiative with a time freeze. Ah! The maidservant was the first to come back to her senses. She screamed, but bit her tongue. She couldn't help but cover her mouth. Her eyes were filled with horror and tears of pain. She stammered, but because her tongue was bitten, she was incoherent. Stamping her feet, she ran down the mountain in a panic. Her face was very pale, as if it was the end of the world. And the rest of the people on the summit were all dumbfounded and in disbelief. Suyu's virtual shadow was actually broken by this unknown old guy. If in the first 3 tests, Suyu had found the trick that they hadn't discovered in time, then in the 4th test, he had to fight with the world-famous Suyu directly. There were no tricks to speak of. I can't accept this. Wang Shuo couldn't believe that this country bumpkin he looked down upon could defeat Suyu's virtual shadow. Take this, dragonfly touching the water. Wang Shuo walked as if he was flying, leaving a series of residual shadows. He rushed in front of Suyu and pointed a finger at his chest. His finger was as fast as lightning, gathering all the vital energy in his body. This move was about breaking the surface with a single point, gathering all the vital energy in his body into a single point, creating an extremely powerful force. As an 8th grade almighty, most 9th grade almighty wouldn't dare to face this move head-on. However, Suyu didn't move at all, allowing his finger to point at his chest. Wang Shuo sneered contemptuously. That's all you've got. However, before he could finish his sentence, Wang Shuo's expression changed abruptly. With a loud cracking sound, accompanied by a heart-wrenching pain, the finger that was pointing at Suyu's chest broke, as if it was pointing at a solid fairy artifact. Breaking the surface with a single point was certainly a wonderful move, but what if the surface was more than 1,000 pounds? Suyu's dantian was 80 times bigger than an ordinary 9th grade fairy, and the vital energy stored was far beyond the reach of a 9th grade almighty. How could a mere 8th grade almighty's vital energy finger shake Suyu? Ah! My hand! You cheated. Wang Shuo was furious, still thinking that Suyu had cheated. Get lost. Suyu frowned, feeling disgusted. He swept his sleeve. It was just a sleeve, but when it hit Wang Shuo, it was like 100,000 mountains, blasting him into the sky. Blood sprayed all the way, and it was unknown whether he was dead or alive. An 8th grade almighty was sent flying into the sky with a wave of a sleeve. This, Zheng Quan's teeth were chattering, and he was terrified. At this moment, how could he still believe that Suyu, whose cultivation couldn't be seen through, was really just a 9th grade fairy? Even a 9th grade almighty couldn't achieve the power to send him into the sky with a wave of a sleeve. Could it be that he was an all-creation's old monster? When Suyu looked over, Zheng Quan's face was full of embarrassment, and he unconsciously bowed and smiled apologetically. Senior Su, please forgive me if I have offended you. Suyu nodded lightly, and without looking at anyone else, he came to the pavilion and waited quietly. The servant ran all the way in a hurry, probably to inform Dongfang Tianfeng. My lady, something bad has happened. The servant ran all the way, losing one of her embroidered shoes, but she had no time to care, so she ran to the lady's boudoir barefooted. The lady in white was leaning against the bed, holding a book of cultivation techniques in her hands, and was studying it carefully. Hearing that, she said indifferently without raising her head, "What happened? Why are you so flustered?" "My lady, something big has happened in the 4th test." The servant was so anxious that smoke was coming out of her mouth. The lady in white looked calm. "They're not reconciled, and they're causing trouble, aren't they? Let them be, and if it gets out of hand, inform the people in the manor to drive them out. Do they need to consult me for such a trivial matter?" "No, it's not that." The servant was out of breath, and after taking a few deep breaths, she said anxiously, "It's the 4th test designed by my lady. Did someone pass it? POW. With a dull sound, the lady in white's hands trembled, and the book in her hands fell to the ground. A pair of crystalline eyes looked over, and her curvaceous body stood up abruptly. Her tranquil expression was filled with surprise and disbelief. You mean, Su Yu's virtual shadow has been defeated? The servant nodded like a chick pecking at grains. Yes, I saw it with my own eyes. Su Yu's virtual shadow was like a dumb penguin, and he was smashed by that person with a single palm strike. The lady in white's face turned extremely ugly, and she felt indignant and wronged. She sat back on the edge of the bed, and her eyes were filled with sorrow. She said mournfully, "In the end, I didn't manage to escape the misfortune of the great Oriental family." Her snow-white palms were clenched tightly together, and her nails were almost digging into her flesh. The servant was sad, and consoled her. "My lady, why do you have to hope for Su Yu? He has never met you before, and he has no feelings for you. Even though you admire him, he doesn't know about it. This will only delay you." The servant knew that her lady was proud and arrogant, and she would not marry anyone but a hero of the age. Among the 4 great starry sky elites, Zhong Wushuang and the demon-devouring emperor were the most dazzling. However, Zhong Wushuang was the destined emperor and the last disciple of the Central Prefecture's king. He was beyond her reach, and the demon-devouring emperor was ferocious and like a beast. She was unwilling to marry him. In the end, there was a proud and arrogant heaven ruler who had defeated all the starry sky elites. Especially after hearing her sister Dongfang Tianfeng's amazing boasting when she returned, she was particularly concerned. Coupled with his true appearance and many stories about him, he was quite in line with the requirements of a future husband. Unfortunately, they were destined to have no future. Seeing that the young miss was about to cry, the maid suddenly had an idea. That's right, that person said that he only wanted to see the young miss. He pitied the young miss and said that even if he won, he wouldn't force the young miss to marry. Upon hearing that, the lady in white suddenly raised her face and said in surprise, "Did he really say that? Is there anyone around to testify?" "Yes, Mr. Liu Chen, and 3 passers-by A, B, and C can all testify." The servant nodded obediently, her face beaming with joy. How could she have forgotten about this? Even though the great Oriental family was looking for a husband, this person had said that it didn't matter if the engagement was not successful. "All right, then I'll meet him and fulfill his wish." The lady in white's snowy cheeks were flushed, and her eyes were filled with joy as she arrived at the 5 Elements Mountain. From afar, she saw an old man with a silver mask sitting in a pavilion, waiting quietly. "Why is it an old man?" The lady in white was surprised. The servant shrugged. "It should be because he looks old. Don't our great Oriental family have old men in their 20s who look like they're in their 60s or 70s? Because of the curse, the people of the great Oriental family aged very quickly, and they understood Su Yu's prematurely aging. Yes, remember to give him some compensation after this. We can't let him come here for nothing." The lady in white made up her mind, and glided into the pavilion like a butterfly. She bowed gracefully. "Greetings, Mr. Su." Su Yu's heart skipped a beat when he saw the lady, and he couldn't help but exclaim, "What a fairy dressed in white." He had seen many beautiful women, and the lady in front of him could probably be ranked in the top 10. Upon hearing his compliment, the lady in white was not happy, but worried. She thought to herself, "Please don't let him go back on his words after noticing my beauty. If that's the case, it'll be troublesome. Mister, your strength is unparalleled, and I admire you very much." The lady in white tried to divert Su Yu's attention elsewhere. Su Yu merely glanced at her, and he had no other intentions. He had seen too many beautiful women, but there were only a few who could sway his heart. "Yes, I'm Su Zhenlong. May I ask where Miss Dongfang is? Are you her servant?" Upon hearing this question, everyone present was stunned. Not only Liu Chen, but Zheng Quan, and even the pretty servant were stunned on the spot. The lady in white's body stiffened slightly, and she looked embarrassed. She couldn't help but glance at Su Yu. How could this person treat her like a servant? She was displeased. Although she didn't care about her identity, she couldn't stand being treated like a servant. The pretty girl immediately tried to salvage the situation for her master. She said sheepishly, Mr. Su, this is Miss Dongfang. I guess you haven't seen her before. I came here for her, and as you wished, she came to see you in person. Chapter 1099. His impolite words once again rendered the few people on the mountain peak speechless. Liu Chen was dumbfounded. What are you doing? You haven't even figured out who you want to meet, and you're here to join in the fun? No matter how well-mannered the woman in white was, she was annoyed. The marriage selection was a major event of her life. How could this man be so stupid? She was ashamed and angry. Staring at Su Yu, she said angrily, I am Dongfang Yu, the eldest daughter of the great Oriental family. May I ask who you are looking for? How did you find me at the marriage selection? Su Yu knew he was in the wrong in the face of the beauty's anger. So, he hurriedly apologized, I didn't mean to disturb your marriage selection. I came here to find a Miss Dongfang. Everyone calls her Miss Dongfang. She is a direct descendant of the great Oriental family. Her maiden name is Dongfang Tianfeng. I don't know why I found you. Hearing this, everyone blinked their eyes and did not know whether to laugh or cry. Even Dongfang Yu let out a chuckle. In that instant, her smile was like a flower, pure and beautiful like a snow lotus. The pretty girl laughed and said, Sir, didn't you know that there are 2 young ladies in the great Oriental family? One is my master, the eldest daughter, and the other is the second daughter. Wait. Su Yu suddenly remembered that the people in the glittering jewel mortal wonderland all called Dongfang Tianfeng the second daughter. Was this a misunderstanding? Had he made such a big mistake? Even though Su Yu was always calm, he still blushed a little. Sir Su, why are you looking for my sister? Dongfang Yu was relieved. Since he wasn't here for a blind date, he definitely didn't want to marry her. So, she asked curiously. Oh, I met you in the glittering jewel mortal wonderland. I'm here to visit you, Su Yu said ambiguously. Dongfang Yu didn't doubt him. Her younger sister was different from her. She was active and had many friends. Her friends often visited her. However, this person in front of her was the only one who had coincidentally come to visit her marriage selection convention. My younger sister is in the house. Let me take you there. Dongfang Yu thought for a while and decided to do him a favor. In this way, Su Yu wouldn't pester her. Su Yu stood up. Thank you, eldest daughter. After taking Su Yu away, Liu Chen and the others also left one after another. Their emotions were extremely complicated. The eldest miss and second miss of the Dongfang family were born from the same father and mother. They were very close to each other and lived next to each other. When he arrived at Dongfang Tianfeng's courtyard, she was nowhere to be seen. After asking around, he found out that she had been summoned by the North Mansion mistress. Wait a moment, my sister will be back soon. Dongfang Yu said. She sat beside him in the yard and looked at Su Yu curiously. Can you tell me how you defeated Su Yu's virtual shadow? I've studied it meticulously. Among the younger generation, there are only a few who can defeat the virtual shadow. Apart from Zhong Wushuang, only Su Yu himself can do it. Dare I ask, where are you from? Why have I never heard of your name? In her opinion, someone with such a high level of battle prowess would definitely not be a nobody. Su Yu was speechless. He was, of course, Su Yu's real body. But, it was a pity that he couldn't say too much about it. I come from a desolate region in the central prefecture, and I've always been training alone. I rarely show myself. Is that so? Dongfang Yu's bright eyes stared at Su Yu for a while. She glanced at the sword box on his back from time to time and couldn't help but ponder. Su Yu's heart skipped a beat. He wouldn't be recognized, would he? Fortunately, at this moment, the sound of footsteps could be heard from outside the yard. One of them was Dongfang Tianfeng, who was as pure as a neighbor's little girl but was actually two-faced. Beside her were several elders of different ages. Su Yu's eyes lit up. He had finally seen Dongfang Tianfeng herself. However, seeing her in person, the pressure from the ordeal of people did not weaken, which disappointed Su Yu. It wasn't Dongfang Tianfeng. The woman who could help Su Yu resolve the ordeal of people that Yun Yazi mentioned was not her. He had spent so much effort to find the wrong person. How could he not be disappointed? Fortunately, He still had 7 days to continue his search. "Hey, sister, you're here? Who is this?" Dongfang Tianfeng burst in. She couldn't help but ask curiously when she saw her sister and a strange man in their yard. Dongfang Yu was afraid that Su Yu would reveal that he was the one who passed the test. She said hurriedly, "This is your old friend. He's here to visit you." "Wait, don't you know him?" She suddenly came to herself and stared at Su Yu with vigilance. She quietly retreated to her sister's side under the protection of the elders. "I don't know him." Dongfang Tianfeng blinked her eyes in confusion. "Who are you?" Dongfang Yu's pretty face turned cold. This person had come to visit her sister as a good friend. How could she not know him? What happened?" The 2 elders behind her were both middle-aged. The one who spoke was a middle-aged man, dignified. Dongfang Yu told the whole story, including the matter of the marriage. She didn't dare to hide anything, because she realized that this person might have some ulterior motive for pretending to be Dongfang Tianfeng's friend. "Your Excellency, I deeply admire your courage, but I'm afraid you won't be allowed to leave easily since you've offended the great Oriental family." The middle-aged woman looked at Su Yu calmly. The other middle-aged woman next to her stared at Su Yu with a slightly strange expression, her face full of suspicion and doubt. Seeing that there had been a misunderstanding, Su Yu really didn't want to have a conflict with the great Oriental family, especially since the person in front of him called herself the Mansion Master. She should be the Mansion Master of the North Mansion, whose strength was at the peak of all creations. Second miss, people of high status tend to be forgetful. Su Yu laughed bitterly. Facing Dongfang Tianfeng, he took off his mask, revealing an old face. That was how he faced them in the glittering jewel wonderland. Dongfang Tianfeng also felt that the sword box on Su Yu's back was somewhat familiar. When he took off his mask, she opened her mouth in surprise and stammered, Su Yuxian. She never dreamed that Su Yuxian would come to visit her. After the battle in the glittering jewel wonderland, she was very clear about the gap between her and this person. Zhong Wushuang was a heaven ruler who was second only to one person. How could he take a fancy to her? Surprise, joy, satisfaction, and all kinds of emotions welled up in her heart. She was so excited that her face was flushed. "Why did you come to see me?" Of course, Su Yu didn't dare to say that he was looking for her to resolve the ordeal of people. He said calmly, "I passed by the eastern continent and thought of you, second miss, so I came to visit you." Nothing else. While the 2 of them were talking, the people around them were surprised. The North Mansion mistress's calm face was filled with surprise. "Are you the rising star of Jojo, Su Yuxian?" Su Yu cupped his fists and bowed. "Mansion mistress, please forgive me for disturbing you." Although the North Mansion mistress was a woman, she was heroic like a man. She laughed and helped him up. "My dear nephew and Feng'er have been through life and death together. How can I disturb you by visiting you? I'm more than happy. My dear nephew, please get up." Such a Jojo heaven ruler took the initiative to visit her. She was more than happy. How could she be displeased? With her countless experiences, if Su Yu continued to grow, he might reach the mortal fairy level in the future, but it was very likely that he would reach the peak of all creations. Of course, she couldn't wait to be on good terms with such a potential stock. What was more precious was that the great Oriental family had a very good impression of this young man who fought against Glittering Jewel and resolved the crisis of the demonic god. Without Su Yuxian, the Glittering Jewel demonic god would have been the first to be exterminated. Now that he was here in person, how could she not be enthusiastic? The only regret in her heart was that she couldn't use him for her own purposes. She looked at her 2 daughters, especially the eldest daughter, and sighed silently. However, the middle-aged woman beside her suddenly sneered. "It's really you." "What? Who is it?" Su Yu only paid attention to Dongfang Tianfeng and didn't pay attention to anyone else. When he heard the voice and looked over, his face couldn't help but change. He said awkwardly, "What a coincidence, South Mansion mistress." The other middle-aged woman was none other than the noblewoman who guarded the divine-level transmission portal. Didn't they say that the North and South Mansions wouldn't visit each other unless there was something important? Why did the South Mansion mistress suddenly come? "Sister, Do you know each other? The North Mansion mistress was surprised. Listening to her sister's tone, it seemed that she knew Su Yu. How could the South Mansion mistress speak up? She had been fooled by this young man, so the divine level transmission portal was blocked. Her face changed several times, and she gritted her teeth. Nothing. The North Mansion mistress was puzzled, but she didn't think there was any deep hatred between the two, so she didn't pursue it further. She turned to Su Yu and said meaningfully, "Haha, I remember you have another identity, right?" The other identity was naturally Su Yu. Due to the change of identity, not everyone knew that Su Yuxian was Su Yu. I had some conflicts with the Central Prefecture's king, so I had to change my appearance. Please forgive me, Su Yu said. As he spoke, his body changed, and he returned to his youth. Ah! Suddenly, there was a scream. Dongfang Yu, who was on the side, cried out in surprise. Her crystal eyes stared at Su Yu in disbelief, not even blinking. When her younger sister said he was Su Yu, Dongfang Yu had guessed it. Until now, it's you. The South Mansion mistress was also surprised, and then she looked delighted. Ha ha ha, the figure I saw that day was really you. As she said that, she couldn't help but look at Dongfang Yu, full of relief. The North and South Mansion mistresses looked at each other, and both had a strange look in their eyes. Until the South Mansion mistress said, "Sister, it's really effortless. I thought Yu wouldn't be with him in this life, but I didn't expect the two of you to be fated. It's really a marriage of thousands of miles." The North Mansion mistress smiled and said nothing. As a mother, how could she not understand her daughter's thoughts? Ever since she learned of Su Yu's existence, her eldest daughter was grateful to Su Yu for his kindness to the great Oriental family, and she also fell in love with such a talented king. Although she didn't say it explicitly, her thoughts were obvious. However, the North Mansion mistress didn't consider the possibility. After all, Su Yu was far away in the Central Prefecture, and he didn't have any relationship with the great Oriental family. Could they kidnap him and bring him here to marry Dongfang Yu? Seeing Dongfang Yu like this, the North Mansion mistress held a marriage contest for her in order to stop her daughter's thoughts. Once she had a husband, she wouldn't have any wild thoughts. Unexpectedly, they didn't look for Su Yu, but Su Yu came to them. Whether from the perspective of Yu or the great Oriental family, this son-in-law was the best candidate in Jojo. Sister, this matter needs further consideration. Although he is here, he has nothing to do with Yu. It's too much to ask him to marry Yu. We are recruiting talents to show our goodwill. If we push him too far, it will backfire. Chapter 1100. Choosing a bride by accident. You mean? The South Mansion mistress recalled what her niece had said just now. He had successfully passed all 4 tests and entered as the first candidate in the marriage selection. Now, he even had a status. Whether he was willing or not, he was now the prospective son-in-law of the great Oriental family. Thinking of this, the South Mansion mistress was overjoyed. She stared at Su Yu and looked him up and down. The more she looked at him, the more she found him pleasing to the eye. He was handsome and young, but he was extremely talented. The great Oriental family hadn't met many outstanding talents like him in tens of thousands of years. Yu was blessed. Su Yu's hair stood on end under the gaze of the South Mansion mistress. Mansion mistresses, if you have something to do, please go ahead. I'm leaving now. I'll visit again if I have the chance. Su Yu had a bad feeling about this, so he left immediately. However, the North Mansion mistress smiled and put her hand on his shoulder. She smiled amiably and said, "My dear son-in-law, you're already here. Where are you going?" "Dear son-in-law?" Su Yu didn't manage to transition from nephew to son-in-law, and his mind went blank. "Haha, you came all the way here for Yu. It must have been hard on you." The North Mansion mistress and the South Mansion mistress stood on either side of Su Yu, holding him in the middle. Both of them looked at him as if they were looking at a treasure, and they didn't want to miss a single hair on his body. Su Yu didn't know that the great Oriental family had been thinking of making him their son-in-law for a long time. Instead, he foolishly joined the great Oriental family, and coincidentally won the first place in the marriage selection. He was like a fat pig that ran into a butcher's house and delivered himself to his door. How could Su Yu dare to be careless about such a major life event? He hurriedly said seriously, "Mansion mistresses, this is a misunderstanding. I didn't know that I had entered the marriage selection, and I didn't mean to delay the eldest lady's life event. Please consider her happiness first, and don't make a rash decision." The two mansion mistresses looked at each other and smiled. The North Mansion mistress couldn't have been more cordial. She even wished she could be Su Yu's mother-in-law. "He, Su Yu, you won the first place in public and became the only one who passed the test. This is tantamount to announcing to the whole world that you've become Dongfang Yu's fiancé. This matter has been decided. Yu's reputation and integrity are tied to you, and she can't marry anyone else. Are you trying to push my Yu into a pit of fire by shirking your responsibility?" Su Yu became anxious and hurriedly said, "I heard that Miss was not willing to go on a blind date, so I challenged the fourth test. I also promised her that even if I succeeded in the challenge, I would not force Miss to marry him. Many people can attest to this." The North Mansion mistress was like a cat that had caught a fresh and delicious mouse. Even her smile was sneaky. "You said that Yu is not willing to go on a blind date." Who said that? Did Yu say it herself?" "No." Su Yu's mouth was bitter. The North Mansion mistress said again, "You promised that even if you win, you won't force Yu to marry you. You have no proof for this. Do you have any documents to prove it? Do you have your blood essence to sign as proof? Is there a notary?" "No." Su Yu's face was about to squeeze out bitter juice. The North Mansion mistress said again, "In that case, you have nothing, yet you chose the challenge. Is it obvious that you are preparing to marry Yu?" Su Yu suddenly felt very wronged. He glanced around and found Dongfang Yu, who was at the side with her head lowered and not saying a word. With a hopeful look, he said hurriedly, "Eldest Miss, you can prove it. She was not willing to go on a blind date, that was absolutely true. As long as she shook her head, the matter would come to an end. However, for some unknown reason, Dongfang Yu kept her head lowered and did not say a word." Su Yu was anxious. "Eldest Miss, marriage is an important matter. I hope you can make a decision soon." Looking at Su Yu, who was asking Dongfang Yu for help as if he was grasping at a life-saving straw, the North and South Mansion mistresses both smiled sympathetically. This guy probably didn't know Yu's thoughts yet. Dongfang Yu lowered her head because her pretty face was flushed and nervous. Her usual indifference was gone. She stammered, I'll listen to my mother's arrangement." After saying that, she ran away like a jog, leaving Su Yu alone, dumbfounded. Su Yu was stunned. He felt like he had been tricked by others. The North Mansion mistress burst into laughter. "My dear son-in-law, since Yu has said so, you should stay here peacefully. We will arrange a wedding ceremony for you in a few days." The two manor heads exchanged glances and ruthlessly arranged for the wedding ceremony to be held so close to each other in order to prevent any accidents from happening. Sensing the seriousness of the situation, Su Yu said in a stern voice, "No. I have two things that I must tell you. First, I already have a family, so I can't marry eldest Miss again." Unexpectedly, the two mansion mistresses looked calm, as if they had already expected it. "So what? You are so outstanding. If you don't have a family, we will be surprised." In this world, strength was everything. Was it strange for a genius like Su Yu to marry several women at the same time? This didn't matter. Su Yu clenched his teeth. "Fine, the second thing is that I must not stay in the great Oriental family. I don't want to bring you a great disaster." "How great is the disaster? Tell me about it." Both of them looked at Su Yu with a playful expression, as if they were looking at their son-in-law. They didn't seem to care about the trouble that Su Yu was talking about. "The Central Prefecture's king is hunting me. He will arrive in 7 days at the latest." The expressions of the two mansion mistresses suddenly froze. The North Mansion mistress said in a low voice, "Is this true? And not an excuse?" Su Yu shook his head. "To tell you the truth, I am going through the 3-9 ordeal. Next will be the human ordeal. This ordeal should be with the Central Prefecture's king. It is extremely dangerous. I came here because I received a hint to find something related to the Phoenix. Only then can I resolve the crisis. That's why I came to see Second Miss. Unfortunately, Second miss is not the person I am looking for. Time is of the essence. Please forgive me for not being able to stay. I will leave now. Seeing that Su Yu was speaking sincerely and didn't seem to be lying, the North and South Mansion mistresses hesitated and didn't dare to stop Su Yu. This was related to the Central Prefecture's king. If he came, should the great Oriental family fight against the Central Prefecture's king for a junior? Su Yu secretly heaved a sigh of relief. He had finally convinced them. However, when Su Yu walked out of the courtyard, he was suddenly blocked by an invisible force and bounced back. So what if it is the Central Prefecture's king? Who can take away the son-in-law that the great Oriental family wants? The hoarse voice of an old woman floated in the void. The North and South Mansion mistresses calmed down and said with joy, "Yes, we will obey the ancestors' decree." The voice in the void then dissipated. It was self-evident that it was one of the two great mortal fairies of the great Oriental family. "My dear son-in-law, let's talk." The North Mansion mistress smiled. Su Yu wanted to leave, but under the watchful eyes of the two mansion mistresses, it was difficult to get away. Moreover, there was a mortal fairy secretly watching him. He didn't understand why he was worth the risk of fighting against the Central Prefecture's king for the great Oriental family to take him in. It was too risky to just take him in as a son-in-law. With a bitter smile, Su Yu pretended to be helpless, but there was a faint light in the depths of his eyes. In the dead of night, Su Yu quietly took out the wooden bird and secretly activated it. However, as soon as the void split open, the leisurely voice of the North Mansion mistress came from it. "My dear son-in-law, where are you going?" Su Yu's heart skipped a beat, and he said embarrassedly, "Haha, I came out for a walk." What a coincidence, the mansion mistress is here too. "Really? Why don't you take me for a walk?" Before Su Yu could put it away, the wooden bird was taken away with a swoosh, leaving a string of chuckles in the void. Su Yu was not discouraged. Not long after the mansion mistress left, he quietly left the house and quietly walked out of the mansion. As a result, before he left the yard, a luxurious figure leaning against the moon gate appeared at the gate of the yard. "Yo, taking a walk in the middle of the night?" The South Mansion mistress smiled faintly. Su Yu said, "Yes, the flowers are beautiful and the moon is full. How can I let such a beautiful scene go to waste? Oh, only ghosts appear in the middle of the night. You have to be careful." The South Mansion mistress smiled and turned to leave. "What? She let me go?" Right at that moment, the void behind Su Yu split open, and the South Mansion mistress's palm reached out from it. She took out a seal and patted Su Yu's back lightly. All of a sudden, Su Yu felt that there was a mark in his body. He could not help but ask in surprise, "What is this?" "The Dongfang Mansion is too big. I was afraid that you would get lost, so I left a mark on your body." "Haha, go for a walk." The blue veins on Su Yu's forehead bulged, and he tried to use his vital energy to erase it. As a result, the mark was embedded in Su Yu's body like a brand, not moving an inch. Ordinary methods could not erase the mark. This woman. Su Yu was annoyed and amused at the same time. This was equivalent to monitoring his movements. No matter where Su Yu went, he could not escape their eyes. This was not marrying a bride, it was clearly a forced marriage. Back in the house, Su Yu took his time to think. Including today, 3 of the 9 days had passed, and the oppression of the ordeal of people was faintly stronger. As for the word Feng, he could not understand for a long time who it was referring to, or what it was referring to. He could not stay in the Dongfang family for a long time, so he had to leave as soon as possible. As for the mark on his body, was there really anything in this world that could resist the impurities of the Milky Way star sand? Su Yu's lips curled into a smile. The next morning, the sky had just turned bright, but the servants in the mansion were already busy decorating the mansion. Because the Dongfang family was about to welcome a new son-in-law. Standing at the door, Su Yu looked helpless. "Sir." A beauty in a white dress came leisurely. Her face was as pretty as snow, and her cheeks were slightly red. She looked at Su Yu shyly. Su Yu sighed. "My lady, have you really decided to marry me? If you insist on not marrying me, the marriage selection ceremony can be cancelled." From the 4th test, which was impossible to pass, It could be seen that Dongfang Yu was not a weak and indecisive woman. Instead, she was decisive and independent. As for marriage, I will listen to my mother's arrangement. Dongfang Yu's crystal eyes were sparkling, and she said softly, "Sir, do you dislike me?" Looking at the stunning white fairy in front of him, Su Yu smiled bitterly. "My lady, your appearance and temperament are impeccable. You are the best among the people. However, I don't want to implicate the Dongfang family and bring disaster to your people. If possible, please persuade your mother." Hearing Su Yu's praise, Dongfang Yu was relieved. Her pretty face was slightly red, and her ears were red. "Don't worry, Sir Su. With the two ancestors here, the Central Prefecture's king may not dare to offend you." The Central Prefecture's king was indeed the most powerful among all the mortal fairies. However, in a real fight, the Central Prefecture's king may not be as powerful as the two mortal fairies. However, Su Yu knew clearly that the human ordeal was unavoidable, and there would be a fight in 6 days. Sighing silently, Su Yu said no more. He kept thinking about the plan to escape from the Dongfang family in his mind. "Sir, if you need anything in the mansion, you can tell us. This is the ancestors' order. We will try our best to satisfy all your requirements," Dongfang Yu said. "Requirements?" Looking at the looming 5 Elements mountain in the distance, Su Yu said, "I want to use the power of 5 elements in that mountain to cultivate. Is it possible?" Cultivate? Dongfang Yu's bright eyes dimmed. Did he want to avoid her by cultivating? However, she didn't show her disappointment on her face. She stood up hurriedly and said, "Yes, that mountain was found in the far west by the two ancestors. It is very beneficial for the people who cultivate the power of 5 elements. Therefore, they moved it back to the family. The inside of the mountain has been opened up as a place for cultivation. If Sir Su wants to cultivate, it is not a problem." Seeing Su Yu was interested in the 5 Elements mountain, Dongfang Yu said while walking, "The 5 Elements mountain contains the power of 5 elements. The deeper you go into the mountain, the stronger the power of 5 elements is. Even the two ancestors haven't walked into the core of the mountain." Su Yu was surprised. Even the strong mortal fairies can't go through this mountain? More than that, the ancestors said the origin of this mountain is mysterious. When it was found, the skeleton of a demon was buried under the mountain. Dongfang Yu looked a little serious. When the ancestors brought it back for identification, they said the skeleton was the skeleton of a deity. The skeleton of a deity? Su Yu was taken aback. Staring at the 5 Elements mountain, he was quite shocked. This mountain could crush a deity to death. It's a pity that it was built so long ago, at least hundreds of thousands of years ago. The skeleton of the demon god has lost its divinity. Otherwise, it would be a treasure, Dongfang Yu said with regret. Hearing such secrets, Su Yu was more interested in the 5 Elements mountain. He was also curious about the mysterious far west. There always seemed to be some strange things that couldn't be found in Jojo. The 5 Elements mountain was dug out, and a straight passage was made leading to the belly. Judging from the dodging marks, it wasn't just a moment ago, but a long time ago. Touching the stone wall, Su Yu immediately felt the hardness of the 5 Elements mountain. His fingertips quietly breathed in and out a trace of silver sword energy. To Su Yu's surprise, the sword energy of the heavenly orchid silver bamboo that could cut through anything cut out a series of sparks when it hit the stone wall. Not even a scratch was left on the stone wall. Noticing Su Yu's movement, Dongfang Yu smiled softly. The material of the 5 Elements mountain is very hard. So far, the ancestor hasn't figured out its composition. He only knows that it's not from Jojo. The 2 elders have tried their best, but they couldn't knock any stone chips off from the mountain. How could Dongfang Yu know that Su Yu used the heavenly orchid silver bamboo, which was known as the greatest divine bamboo in Jojo? Theoretically, it could even break a fairy artifact. However, it didn't leave a trace. The hard material alone could be regarded as the world's most precious treasure. The great Oriental family really found a top-grade treasure in the far west. My power of 5 elements is shallow. I'll leave you here. If you feel that you can't bear the power of 5 elements anymore, don't go deeper, Dongfang Yu said as she left slowly. Su Yu walked into the depths of the cave alone. Slowly closing his eyes, he broke through the last level of comprehension with the help of the increasingly intense power of 5 elements. In the 9 jade spiritual pearl, inside the 5 elements divine prison. In a boundless darkness, a black-green water dragon was constantly absorbing the brilliance emitted by the demon clan characters. His eyes were filled with morbid excitement. Almost there. Just a little bit more, and that brat will comprehend the 100th level. Finally, he's going to succeed. I finally found a substitute with nature-defying comprehension. Finally, I'm going to get out of here. Brat, don't let me down. The black-green water dragon grinned hideously. However, right at this moment, as Su Yu entered the 5 Elements mountain, the black-green water dragon's face changed slightly. This feeling, is it that thing? Chapter 1101. Su Yu was completely unaware of this as he went deeper into the mountain. As the power of 5 elements grew stronger, Su Yu's understanding of the 100th Demon Clan inscription became clearer and clearer. When he was halfway into the cave, the power of 5 elements was approaching the limit of Su Yu's endurance. He stopped there and sat down with his legs crossed to comprehend it quietly. Soon, Su Yu entered a state of contentment, just like when he was climbing the mountain. He could feel that the 100th Demon Clan inscription would be broken through here. 1 day passed, and there were 5 days left before the human ordeal. Is he still training in the mountain? The North Mansion mistress came to the cave and frowned slightly. Dongfang, you had been guarding the entrance for a day. Her beautiful face looked a little gloomy. Mother, I think it's better to let it go. I can see that he has no feelings for me. After a day of thinking, Dongfang Yu calmed down from the initial excitement. She admired a dragon among men like Su Yu, and it was her wish to marry him. But was this really appropriate? The North Mansion mistress sighed softly. I know you're kind-hearted and don't like to be forced. But since the great ancestor has found out about this matter, there's no way we'll let it go. Whether you're willing or not, the Dongfang family must take this dragon among men into our fold. The ancestor? Dongfang Yu felt bitter. The great Oriental family could not disobey his will. Looking into the depths of the cave, Dongfang Yu's eyes were full of apology. 2 days passed, and there were 4 days left before the human ordeal. A small part of the blessed and heavenly lands had been turned into ruins because of the long battle between the 2 mortal fairies. Their attacks were accompanied by strange phenomena of heaven and earth. Mountains and rivers were destroyed, and the earth veins were cut off. Everywhere they passed, they left behind ruins that could not be restored for hundreds of years. The Duanxian Cliffmaster, who had been struggling for 5 days, was also showing signs of decline. Compared to his former splendor, he was in a sorry state at the moment. There was a bloody hole the size of a bowl on his chest, which went through his chest and back. It was extremely horrible. His soul seemed to be separated from his body, as if it was about to leave his body. The mortal fairy's strength in his body was exhausted. Beside him, there were a lot of damaged treasures scattered on the ground. Even so, he still stared coldly at the young man in the royal robe and didn't take a single step back. Although the Central Prefecture's king had consumed a lot of his energy, he was not seriously injured. He said in a low voice, I can't believe it. What did he give you to make you fight with me for 5 days at the risk of your life? The Duanxian Cliffmaster said coldly, you don't need to know about this. As he spoke, he tore open the void behind him with a backhand palm and slowly entered it. He sighed silently in his heart, the strength of the Central Prefecture's king is beyond my expectations. I thought that he could hold on for 6 days, but I only managed to hold on for 5 days after using all my magic treasures. Kid, I've tried my best. The rest is up to you. Glancing at the treasures on the ground, the Duanxian Cliffmaster's eyes flashed with pain. Just thinking about his agreement with Su Yu, his eyes were filled with hope. If the boy could survive, this deal would not be considered a loss. The Central Prefecture's king did not stop the Duanxian Cliffmaster as he watched him retreat. Even as a top mortal fairy, he was not sure that he could kill the severed fairy Cliffmaster. It was not easy to kill someone who had reached the mortal fairy realm. Moreover, he had more important things to do now. His gaze turned cold as his heart thumped. The eastern continent. When did he escape to that place? Swish. Half an hour later, a figure in an imperial robe appeared in the sky above the central prefecture city. Staring at the central prefecture city that had been smashed into ruins by a sword, the young face of the central prefecture's king was gloomy, and his blue veins were wriggling on his angry face. With a cold glance, the central prefecture's king stared at the ruins under his feet and shouted, "Come out." Suddenly, a gloomy ghostly aura rose from under the ruins and split into two, turning into two hazy ghostly figures of a man and a woman. Don't get me wrong. I saw so many corpses, and it would be a pity to waste them like this, so I used them to raise the ghost army. This was not my idea. The man and the woman spoke at the same time. Not only were their words synchronized, but even their tones were exactly the same, as if they were speaking with the same person. The central prefecture's king raised his eyebrows. "Why are you here?" "Oh, the plan has been exposed, of course. I have to find a way to meet you," the man and the woman said. He knew that the ghost clan had been exposed, so he said coldly, "I ordered my disciple Zhong Wushuang to receive you." "Where is he?" The man and the woman shrugged their shoulders and said, "He was like this when I came here." "Your disciple is probably under the ruins." Hearing that, the central prefecture's king was not worried at all. He shook his head firmly. The Emperor of Destiny can only be killed by heaven, and ordinary people can't kill him. He should have left the central prefecture. "Well, tell me, do you know who did it?" The man and the woman shook their heads at the same time. No. When this place was destroyed, they were still on their way here. The central prefecture's king was annoyed and said, "Forget it, anyway, the 9 prefectures are in my pocket, and this is just a central prefecture city." There was a hint of worry in his eyes. Where was the glittering jewel mortal fairy? This woman, who was called Master by him, was his biggest fear. Now, her disappearance was not a bad thing for him. After thinking for a while, the central prefecture's king said, "You lead the Ghost Clan army to stay here, and I will go to deal with an important matter first. It will take me a few days to half a month." After that, he came to the divine level transmission array. The surroundings were destroyed, but the divine level transmission array was not damaged. He stood on the array, and his eyes flashed coldly. "Dirty ant, you have lived long enough." However, when he launched the array did not move, and his face could not help but be stunned. "The array at the other end is sealed." A look of anger appeared in his eyes, and immediately turned into a cold snort. "I will let you linger on for another day." After that, he tore the void and rushed to the eastern continent. Su Yu, who was in the midst of his comprehension, felt his heart skip a beat, and he woke up from his meditation. An inexplicable chill came without any warning. With a sigh of relief, Su Yu restrained his emotional fluctuations, but the chill around his body was looming and did not dissipate. They only resisted for a short period of 5 days. Su Yu's eyes were fixed. This chill should be the arrival of the central prefecture's king, who came faster and earlier than expected. He could not stay in the eastern continent any longer. Staring at the 5 elements divine prison in his hand, Su Yu was struggling. After 2 days of meditation, the last demon character was about to break through. If Su Yu was given 2 more days, he should be able to break through smoothly. However, time waited for no man, and it was too late. Looking at the depths of the cave, the only thing he could do now was to continue to go deeper and use the more powerful power of the 5 elements to break through the shackles. Since the 5 elements divine prison was an emperor-based saint artifact, if he exerted its power, it would be helpful to resolve the tribulation of human. Running his vital chi, Su Yu took a step into the depths of the mountain. Dong, with a dull sound, Su Yu was pressed by the power of the 5 elements beyond the limit, and the blood in his body was boiling. He spat out a mouthful of blood, and his whole body was bounced off as if he was hit by a huge force. The limit is difficult to break through. No wonder the mortal fairy old monster was blocked, Su Yu said secretly, and did not break through with brute force. If brute force could break through the limit, perhaps the 2 mortal fairy old monsters of the great Oriental family had already entered the hinterland of the 5 Elements mountain and touched the hidden secrets of the mountain. After pondering for a while, Su Yu's eyes flashed, and he took another step. At the same time, golden and black light emerged on the surface of his body, and the two shone with each other, making the black and gold intertwined on the left and right halves of Suyu's body, which looked very strange. The power of the divine dragon and the power of the demonic god emerged together between Suyu's legs. The powerful power of the 5 elements erupted from the 5 elements mountain was extremely repulsive. However, it failed to blast Suyu back. Relying on the 2 kinds of power, Suyu quickly took 9 steps in a row and entered an area in front of him that few people could reach. This place could only be reached by the old monsters of the peak of all creations, and it contained the power of the 5 elements 10 times stronger. Under such great pressure, Suyu's comprehension in his mind sped up a lot. Not enough. Suyu shook his head. Under such pressure, he might be able to complete the final comprehension in 1 day. However, 1 day later, the central prefecture's king would come. Staring at the darker depths of the cave, Suyu fell into a short period of thought. Further ahead, it was the area that only the 2 great mortal fairies could withstand. The pressure of the power of the 5 elements there was enough to kill people. It was not that the previous mansion masters had not tried it before. They often entered the area ahead and were immediately seriously injured. Their lives were in danger and they had to retreat quickly. Suyu touched his chest, and with a hint of awe in his eyes, he took a step forward. In an instant, a feeling that his body was about to be crushed rushed into his heart, from inside to outside, as if his whole body was about to be broken. Streaks of blood marks as thick as fingers densely covered Suyu's body. This was a sign that his body had reached its limit and was about to be broken, and it was getting more and more intense. However, at this critical moment, an emerald heart in Suyu's chest started beating faster, and it released an extremely pure life force. The hideous blood marks that densely covered his body quickly healed. Clenching his teeth and enduring the severe pain, Suyu took a few steps in a row and came to the depths of the dark cave. On the ground here, Suyu felt the residual power of the mortal fairy on the wall and the claw marks left on the stone wall. Those were the marks left by the mortal fairy old monster clawing the stone wall to prevent being pushed back by the power of the 5 elements. This place was the critical point of the mortal fairy old monster. Suyu's heart was beating violently as if it was about to jump out of his chest. It was very uncomfortable. The power of the 5 elements here is enough for me to comprehend in half a day. Suyu's eyes showed a hint of satisfaction. Suppressing the discomfort in his heart, Suyu sat cross-legged, ready to complete the comprehension of the 100th Demon Clan character here for a long time. He subconsciously looked deeper, which was the forbidden area that the strong mortal fairy old monster had never set foot in, the real hinterland of the cave. Unlike what he imagined, the deepest part of the cave was not dark, but emitted a soft golden light, shaped like mist, very hazy, making it hard to see clearly. Suddenly, Suyu saw something out of the corner of his eyes and was shocked. He looked at it carefully, but there was nothing in it. Am I hallucinating? Suyu couldn't help but doubt himself. Perhaps his heart was beating too fast and was overwhelmed, causing him to hallucinate. However, when Suyu retracted his gaze, he found a faint beating in the corner of his eyes. This time, Suyu was taken aback. He suddenly got up and looked into the depths of the cave. After careful observation, Suyu finally found the source of the movement. It turned out to be a golden skeleton. At this moment, the skeleton was turning its head, and a pair of eyes burning with dark green flames was looking at Suyu from afar. The shape of the skeleton made Suyu gasp, "It's you. How is this possible?" Chapter 1102. The head of the golden skeleton was that of a flood dragon, but the body of a human. As he looked at Suyu, his eyes, which were burning with emerald flames, were filled with confusion. It was as if he was wondering where he had seen Suyu before. Gang daily. Suyu was extremely shocked. He wouldn't be surprised if the 5 Elements Mountain hid the remains of a deity. However, the remains belonged to an old friend of his. Among the people he knew, there was only one person with a flood dragon head and a human body, Gang Daily. The disciple of the guardian of the dragon abyss of the 9 underworlds, Elder Ju. Why was he here? In this ancient mountain with hundreds of thousands of years of history? Also, why was he only left with a skeleton? Gang Daily scratched his head, as if he was confused. He stared at Suyu for a long time, then slowly crawled deeper into the cave. There were a few sparkling and translucent colors there, as if something was moving. Su Yu stared at Gang daily until he crawled into the darkness before he retracted his gaze. The bewilderment in his heart did not dissipate even after a long time. A combination of a flood dragon and a human, it's really rare. The voice of the evil god sounded in his mind. You seem to know him? Su Yu nodded lightly. I do. He's an old friend. He's from, he could not help but pause. Gang Daily's background was still a mystery. He was raised by Elder Ju, who came from the Central Prefecture. What a waste, he is already dead. If not, we could capture him and study him. It is hard for a combination of a flood dragon and a human to survive. I believe that the flood dragon that gave birth to him is definitely not an ordinary flood dragon. Evil God said. Dead. Su Yu's heart tightened. Gang Daily had followed the creatures of the Zhenlong continent to Jiuzhou. Why did Gang Daily die? What about the others? What about Xia Jingyu? Where was Qin Xiana? Su Yu had a bad premonition about Elder Liao's disappearance, and he became restless and anxious. However, Su Yu's rationality told him that now was not the time to panic. The Central Prefecture's king was coming. If he wanted to ascertain the current situation of the true dragon living beings, he would have to survive this trial first. Suppressing the uneasiness in his heart, Su Yu sat down with his legs crossed and seized the time to comprehend. As time passed, Su Yu's comprehension of the last demon clan's inscription became smoother and smoother. Under the suppression of the dense power of the 5 elements, the obscurity of the past was like water flowing into a canal. He only needed half a day to successfully comprehend it. Somewhere in the Central Plains, Han Xuan's face was full of anger. Her feet were tied to a strange iron rod by a long chain. The iron cudgel was stuck deep into the ground, emitting a cold and gloomy aura. Its material was also quite extraordinary. Han Xian secretly tried to break free, but she found that not only was the chain indestructible, but even the iron rod could not move at all. She glared at the petite girl in front of her and said angrily, "Third junior sister, does master know that you've brought me here?" "I don't know," third junior sister answered expressionlessly. Han Xian bitterly sighed, "What exactly do you want to do to me? They imprisoned me here for a few days and only allowed me to comprehend the Jade Maiden Heavenly Frost art. For this, they even found some strange treasures to help me comprehend the last level." She was curious as to why her master and third junior sister wanted her to cultivate the Jade Maiden Heavenly Frost art to perfection. This cultivation method was imparted to her by her master. As for its use, she didn't know, nor did she bother to know. In any case, her master told her to cultivate it, so she cultivated it. But no matter how stupid she was, she should be able to understand that this cultivation technique was not ordinary. "Don't you know? Cultivate it." The third junior sister was expressionless as she sat beside him. There was a complicated look in her clear eyes. She looked up at the sky and murmured, "It should be soon. There are still 3.5 days left." There were only 3.5 days left before the human tribulation. At the edge of the eastern continent, an uninvited guest came. Along with a huge void crack that ran through the sky and the earth, a domineering figure in an imperial robe stepped out. This step made the world fall silent. All creatures around were silent and didn't even dare to breathe, as if they were in awe of this emperor of the 9 prefectures. His deep eyes seemed to see through hundreds of millions of mountains and rivers, and he stared at the most central city of the eastern continent. A cold smile appeared at the corner of his mouth. "Ant, I'm coming. No one in the world can save you." In the central city of the eastern continent, in a secret room, 2 old women were sitting opposite each other. One was dressed in black, and the other was dressed in white. On the cold face of the old man in black, a pair of eyes opened slowly. "Do you feel it?" The old woman in white opened her eyes and nodded slowly. "The Central Prefecture's king is coming. What should we do? Is it really necessary for us to resist the human tribulation for Su Yu?" The old man in black hesitated. The old man in white said affirmatively, "Of course. The Central Prefecture's king is ambitious. He plotted to kill the emperor of the 9 prefectures, Shinichen, and was willing to be the slave of the glittering jewel demonic god. Now 100 years later, I don't know how powerful he is, the old man in black said. As the oldest family on the continent, it had experienced more than the history of the continent. The secrets of the continent were never secrets to them. No matter how powerful he is, we have to fight him. It is possible for that guy to get a ticket. The ticket alone is worth the effort of the great Oriental family. Moreover, there is no reason that we can't resist a mortal fairy together, the old woman in white said affirmatively. The old woman in black was silent for a while, and then nodded slightly. Well, for the ticket, we will sacrifice our lives. In the belly of the 5 Elements mountain, Su Yu was sweating profusely, and his body was trembling constantly. 5 halos of different colors surrounded Su Yu, and they were becoming more and more solid and clear. The 5 Elements divine prison in his palm was full of colorful lights, which were flickering like boiling water. Its body was changing constantly, shrinking and expanding as if it was about to explode from the inside out. All the signs showed that Su Yu's comprehension of the 5 Elements divine prison had reached a critical juncture. All of a sudden, Su Yu opened his eyes, and 2 beams of 5-colored light shot out from his pupils, heading straight for the outside of the cave. Dongfang Yu, who was waiting silently outside the cave, changed her expression abruptly, and hurried away. The 2 colorful lights disappeared into the sky, and opened 2 pitch-black circles in the boundless universe. Dongfang Yu said in surprise, "The power of 5 elements is so powerful that it can break the void. Has his attainment in the power of 5 elements reached a high level?" As far as she knew, even the ancestors who had studied the power of 5 elements for a long time only reached a high level. This was the limit that a mortal could comprehend. However, it took the 2 ancestors many years to figure it out bit by bit. How old was Su Yu? Dongfang Yu was more and more shaken. Her reason told her that forcing Su Yu to do this was not what she wanted. After hesitating for a long time, she turned around and left. She didn't hear Su Yu's laughter in the cave. After trying for so long, I finally succeeded. Holding the 5 Elements divine prison in his hand, Su Yu wiped the sweat on his face, and couldn't suppress his excitement. The difficulty of refining this emperor-based saint artifact was beyond imagination. After several years, he finally succeeded. After comprehending 100 words, he finally had a certain degree of control over the 5 Elements divine prison, and could exert 10% of its power. While he was feeling happy, the black-green water dragon in the dark space of the 5 Elements divine prison also laughed. Ha, 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 he finally succeeded. I have been waiting for this day for a long time. The black-green water dragon was very excited, and a hideous smile appeared on his face. You trapped me in the 5 Elements divine prison for 100,000 years. Frost divine flood dragon, I will definitely kill all your descendants when I break out of the prison. His hideous roar echoed in the dark space, which was very unpleasant to hear. Now, I just need to wait for that brat to open the 5 Elements divine prison, and then I can get out of here. The black-green water dragon was waiting excitedly for Su Yu to try to operate the 5 Elements divine prison. However, after waiting for a long time, he didn't see any movement from Su Yu. So, he turned his eyes and turned into a small shadow of a flood dragon, which slowly drilled out of the 5 Elements divine prison. Congratulations, you finally succeeded. The black-green water dragon was full of joy, and no coldness could be seen on his face at all. Su Yu was not surprised by his appearance at all. He nodded his head slightly and said, "Yes, I succeeded. How should I activate it next?" Like the 5-pulse dominant wave, I just need to instill vital energy into it. The black-green water dragon shook his head seriously. No, after comprehending the 100th Demon Clan inscription, you can activate the real power of the 5 Elements divine prison to suppress it. You only need to follow the spell I taught you to activate the 5 Elements divine prison. Okay, go ahead. The black-green water dragon suppressed his excitement to prevent Su Yu from noticing it. Then, he recited a series of strange spells seriously. As he recited the spell, the 5 Elements divine prison trembled slightly. It seemed it had sensed something. Have you memorized it? After reciting, the black-green water dragon stared at Su Yu. Su Yu nodded his head. Then, have a try. The power you can exert is beyond your imagination, the black-green water dragon said. However, Suyu just looked at the black-green water dragon quietly without moving an inch. Suyu's calm eyes made the black-green water dragon feel a little uneasy. He forced a smile and said, "What? Don't you want to control the 5 elements divine prison?" Suyu shook his head and said calmly, "To be precise, I don't want to be controlled by others." "What do you mean?" The black-green water dragon's heart skipped a beat, but his face was blank. However, Suyu said calmly, "Don't you feel tired after pretending to be an artifact spirit for so long?" The black-green water dragon's face froze instantly. Then, he stared at Suyu's profound eyes to make sure Suyu was not testing him. Then, he took a deep breath and said in a gloomy tone, "How do you know I am not an artifact spirit?" Suyu said calmly, "Because you have never called me master. As an artifact spirit, you shouldn't call me master." It was natural for an artifact spirit to obey its master. However, the black-green water dragon always called Suyu you or boy. This was not just the personality of an artifact spirit, but the black-green water dragon couldn't call him master at all. "Is that all?" The black-green water dragon stared at Suyu. Suyu said with a faint smile, "Of course, the real owner of the 5 elements divine prison, the devil god." Hearing that, the black-green water dragon's pupils shrank fiercely. Then, he said in horror, "How do you know I am the devil god? I have never performed any miracles." Chapter 1103. He had a feeling that someone had betrayed him secretly. "Of course, you told me that yourself." Looking at the black-green water dragon, Suyu said with a sneer, "An artifact spirit dares to ask another person to refine the treasure itself. The only explanation is that the master is either dead or the black-green water dragon is the master. Obviously, I haven't received any message from the 5 elements divine prison after refining 100 demon clan inscriptions, which means the master is not dead. So, the answer is obviously the latter. You are the real master of the 5 elements divine prison. As for the monster god, the Dongfang family once obtained the remains of a monster god from the foot of the 5 elements mountain. Since the 5 elements divine prison and the 5 elements divine mountain are connected to each other, I guessed that the remains might be your real body." The black-green water dragon stared at Suyu with a gloomy expression. He was so surprised that Suyu's insight was totally beyond his expectation. In fact, even the last bit of his conjecture was not wrong at all. In the past, his body was crushed by a powerful enemy who used the 5 elements mountain. Only his soul and celestial energy sphere were left. Then, he escaped into the 5 elements divine prison to avoid death. However, the 5 elements divine prison could only be opened by an external force. Although his soul was preserved, he couldn't escape. In this way, the 5 elements divine prison changed hands several times until it fell into Suyu's hands. He had been trapped here for 100,000 years. Finally, he deceived Suyu to refine a part of the 5 elements divine prison. As long as he activated the 5 elements divine prison, the soul of the black-green water dragon could escape. However, he didn't expect that Suyu had already seen through his plan. "When did you suspect me?" the black-green water dragon said angrily as he knew his plan had failed. Suyu shrugged his shoulders and said, "When did I believe you?" Suyu didn't believe any of the words of the black-green water dragon. The black-green WM was taken aback. After a long while, it revealed a self-deprecating expression and couldn't help but roar with laughter. "Ha ha ha, I'm a dignified demon god of my generation, but I was trapped by a little human junior." When he was about to go crazy, Suyu's calm voice came into his ears. "How difficult it is for you to escape." "What?" The black-green flood dragon couldn't believe his ears. "You mean you can let me go?" "Of course." Suyu replied without hesitation. "Do you have a grudge against me?" The black-green water dragon thought for a while and shook its head with certainty. "No." "Do you have a grudge against me?" Suyu asked. "No." "Then, what's the reason why I shackled you?" Suyu asked. The black-green flood dragon was silent for a while, and a hint of slyness flashed in its eyes. "You and I have no grudge against each other. Sealing me will do you no good. So, are you going to let me go?" "I'm not," Suyu replied without giving it a second thought. The ink azure water dragon was stunned, and then it said in a low voice, "Are you playing with me?" "No." Suyu raised two of his fingers. "First, it is indeed not beneficial for me to seal you, but it is also not beneficial for me to release you. Second, after all, I have refined a part of the 5 elements divine prison. As its owner, I guess you don't want me to live in this world after you escape. Moreover, my cultivation is far inferior to a deity's." The black-green water dragon, who was lost in thought for a while, said slowly, "Second, I can sign a deity's contract with you. I promise I won't kill you. A deity's contract can't be violated. You can rest assured about this. First, what do you want in return?" He knew Suyu was negotiating with him. "First, I don't know anything about a deity's contract. So, I won't believe anything you say. Second, what I want is very simple. Before I become stronger than you must help me with everything." Suyu gave 2 conditions that he had prepared beforehand. "No way." The black-green water dragon refused on the spot without hesitation. He was a mighty god, but he couldn't serve a lowly race's junior like a servant. Suyu's answer was quite straightforward. "Then you can continue to stay in the 5 elements divine prison. Just hope you will meet a genius who can comprehend 100 demon clan inscriptions as fast as I can." The black-green water dragon's face darkened. If such a genius was so easy to find, he wouldn't have been trapped here for 100,000 years. Moreover, Suyu wouldn't allow the 5 elements divine prison to be discovered easily. Suppressing the 5 elements divine prison in a desolate area was a piece of cake for him. After weighing the pros and cons, the black-green water dragon found he had no bargaining chips in front of Suyu. "How do you want me to help you?" the black-green water dragon asked. Suyu said with a smile, "It's very simple. You can protect me from death. There are 2 ways to protect me from death. First, you can help me improve my strength. Second, you can help me solve a life or death crisis, such as the one in front of me." Staring at Suyu's smiling face, the black-green water dragon had a feeling he was fooled. It seemed this guy had planned this for a long time. However, did he have a choice? "Tell me, what's the crisis?" "I'm trapped in the divine prison, so I can only control 30% of the divine prison's power. Unless a mortal fairy descends, I can easily suppress him in the divine prison, and he won't be able to escape forever," the black-green water dragon said proudly. Suyu said with a faint smile, "It's a pity that the enemy I will face this time is not only a strong mortal fairy, but also a top one among the mortal fairies." The black-green water dragon's face suddenly became stiff. Then, he said angrily, How could you provoke such a powerful enemy at your level? Tell me, can you help me? If you can't, I can seal the 5 elements divine prison now. No one can find it in 1,000,000 years, let alone 100,000 years," Suyu said calmly. The black-green water dragon kept rolling his eyes as if he was weighing something. "I advise you not to be half-hearted. If you fall into the hands of such a mortal fairy, do you think you can escape from him even if you break free? It's more likely that he will use it to refine some magic weapons. After all, it is the soul of a devil god." Hearing that, the black-green water dragon snorted. Obviously, Suyu's reminder had disrupted his plan. The 5 elements divine prison is not enough to suppress a top mortal fairy, but I can still suppress him for 1 or 2 days. 1 or 2 days. Suyu's eyes lit up. That's enough. After reaching an agreement, Suyu left the cave. When he was about to leave the cave, he saw Dongfang Yu standing at the entrance of the cave, looking into it anxiously. "Eldest lady." Suyu walked over and said. Dongfang Yu stared at Suyu, her crystal-like eyes filled with reluctance. Her snow-white sleeves fluttered, and 2 objects flew out. One was the wooden bird that had been taken away by the South Mansion mistress, and the other was 9 extremely delicate formation flags. "Although your flying artifact can travel through the void, how can it be faster than my mother and my aunt? These are the space spell flags, which were refined by the 2 ancestors for me. They were intended to save my life and help me escape in times of crisis. Although they are not as good as the divine-level transmission array, they are comparable to the super transmission array, which is enough to transport you to another prefecture." "Miss Dongfang, you?" Suyu was surprised. He knew how precious these spell flags were without her telling him. Even for a mortal fairy, it took a lot of effort to refine such spell flags. They were not sold in the market at all. Dongfang Yu said apologetically, "I'm sorry, Lord Su. On behalf of the great Oriental family, I apologize for your behavior recently. Now, while the two ancestors are still in seclusion, you should leave as soon as possible." Suyu was very grateful. He took the wooden bird and the spell flags and thanked her sincerely. "Miss Yu is so righteous. I admire you. I will remember this favor. Goodbye." Suyu grabbed the wooden bird and activated it immediately. Then, he broke through the void and left the great Oriental family immediately. Dongfang Yu's snow-white pretty face was surrounded by two pink spots. Suyu's call of Miss Yu made her satisfied. She thought to herself that this was the right way to go. Half a day later, as a huge space crack ran through the sky and earth, the entire central city of the eastern continent was suddenly shocked. From the secret chambers of the north and south mansions, two figures, one black and one white, suddenly flew out. They were the black and white mortal fairies of the great Oriental family. The two of them stared at the crack as if they were facing a formidable enemy. Streaks of golden light diffused from the crack. "Anyone who stands in my way will die." A figure in a royal robe stepped out of the crack. His whole body was emitting golden light, which could not be looked at directly by those who were not all creations. Ordinary, strong Almighty couldn't even see his face clearly. His pitilessly overbearing words even shook the sky to the point it exploded apart and densely covered the sky in fine spatial rifts. Every word and action of a mortal fairy could cause a strange phenomenon in the world. However, he was the first one who could crack the sky and earth with just a word. The black and white mortal fairies suddenly became serious. The Central Prefecture's king was much more horrible than the rumors. "Hand over Suyu, and you will not die." The Central Prefecture's king stared at the black and white mortal fairies coldly with his hands behind his back. "To catch Suyu, you must pass through us first." The black and white mortal fairies looked at each other. Then, a faint demonic aura surged up from their bodies. Their bodies also changed strangely. A pair of black screeches appeared on the top of their heads. Their bodies were also wrapped by the demonic aura, which made them look like demons. The Central Prefecture's king said with a playful smile, "I heard that you are the descendants of the demonic god Linlang. It seems the rumor is true." As soon as he finished speaking, his whole body emitted a dazzling golden light, which covered thousands of miles of the sky. The golden light contained extremely domineering power. Everything that was hit by the golden light was turned into nothingness in an instant. The black and white mortal fairies changed their expressions. Then, they both activated the strength of demonic god to resist the golden light. However, when they resisted the power of the golden light, two palm prints came out of the golden light and patted their chests respectively. In an instant, their bodies were burned by a ball of golden flames. In a breath's time, the flames had burned through their chests and backs. The divine tribulation fire? The black and white mortal fairies were shocked. They hurriedly stepped back and activated the strength of mortal fairies to suppress the spread of the golden flame. However, when they activated the strength of mortal fairies, another pair of palm prints suddenly attacked them. They knew it was the attack of the Central Prefecture's king. However, they were forced to use their strength of mortal fairies to suppress the divine tribulation fire. How could they resist it? This palm print bombarded their bodies into a mist of blood. In the mist of blood, the golden divine flame was still burning. The two mist of blood retreated quickly and recondensed into the black and white mortal fairies in the distance. When one reached the level of the mortal fairy, his body could be reborn at any time. This was also the reason why the mortal fairies were so difficult to be killed. "Hand over Suyu, and I will spare your lives. I will say this for the last time." The Central Prefecture's king walked out of the golden light with his hands clasped behind his back. He looked indifferent. If he was conceited last time, he was confident this time. The black and white mortal fairies' eyes were full of horror. They had thought that the strength of the Central Prefecture's king would be greatly enhanced after he became the servant of the glittering jewel demonic god. However, they never expected that he would be so powerful. They were both mortal fairies, but they were no match for him. Deep horror and bitterness were rolling in their hearts. It was definitely not a wise decision to take Su Yu in. They overestimated themselves and underestimated the Central Prefecture's king. After looking at each other, the black and white mortal fairies made a decision in a moment. They might not be afraid of death, but what about the great Oriental family?